Chapter 145. After they finished talking about business, poplar fruit, and Zhang Yujie's conversation finally began. I heard that you have a puppy? Zhang Yujie asked curiously. Yeah, eh? How did you know? Poplar fruit was surprised. He had just brought the puppy home yesterday. Zhang Yujie had already found out today? Haha, who told you to post the photo on Weibo? Of course, I know. Zhang Yujie laughed loudly. You followed my Weibo? Poplar fruit asked. I didn't know. In the past 2 months, too many people had followed poplar fruit, so many that he had to block the notifications of new followers. Zhang Yujie had never told him about it, so of course, he didn't know. Haha, I secretly followed it. How did you know? So, you have to pay attention to your words in the future. Don't think that I don't know when you secretly scold me on the internet. Zhang Yujie said proudly. Is there a function to secretly follow? Poplar fruit laughed and changed the topic. Why didn't I find out? No, don't change the topic. Zhang Yujie shouted. Then we have to quickly give Xinlang a suggestion. Maybe he'll accept it. Yanghua didn't know what was good for her and continued to talk nonsense. Don't change the topic. Zhang Yujie said angrily, slapping the sofa. Oh, then what topic were you talking about? Poplar fruit asked. What topic? Ah. Zhang Yujie was so amused by poplar fruit's joke that she forgot what she wanted to say. Haha. Poplar fruit laughed proudly. Zhang Yujie was also annoyed by him. She threw a pillow on the bed as if she wanted to kill this bad guy. She laughed and said, Look at your nonsense. I forgot what I wanted to say. He talked about dogs. Poplar fruit kindly reminded him. Yes, a dog. Didn't you post a photo yesterday, saying that you raised a dog for Kiki? Zhang Yujie asked. I think it's a golden retriever, right? Yes, just born, Poplar fruit said. You brought it back as soon as it was born? Zhang Yujie asked in surprise. Which pet shop is so reckless? The female dog has to take care of the puppy for a while. I didn't buy it from a pet store, Poplar fruit said. I adopted it from a stray dog rescue center. It's like this. Poplar fruit briefly told Zhang Yujie the story of the golden retriever and Mema Jin. So that's how it is. Then it's quite pitiful, Zhang Yujie said, lying on the sofa and twirling a thread exposed by the sofa cover. Zhang Yujie's personality was more straightforward and carefree. After listening to the story, she didn't show much sadness, unlike Feng Beibei and the others who cried yesterday. Actually, if you want to raise a dog for Kiki, you don't have to go to the rescue center, Zhang Yujie said. I have a friend here who is in this line. What kind of dog do you want? I can get it for you. She counted with her fingers and said, Samoyed, Chow Chow, Saint Bernard, Sausage, and so on. Even if you want an authentic Tibetan Mastiff from the plateau, he can get it for you. Moreover, my friend's dogs all have pedigree certificates, and I guarantee that they are all excellent purebred dogs. Haha, no need to go through so much trouble. Poplar fruit laughed and said, Thank you for your kindness, but I don't care about breed or pedigree when I raise a dog. As long as Kiki likes it, it's fine. This golden retriever puppy is quite fated to be with Kiki. Then you have to take it for more checkups. Zhang Yujie said worriedly. I'm afraid that it has fleas or some strange disease. I don't want it to touch Kiki. Don't worry, but it has already been checked at the rescue center, Poplar fruit laughed. Before the adoption, the stray dog rescue center asked the veterinarian to do a comprehensive examination of the golden retriever puppy. Poplar fruit was still very assured about this. And now, the golden retriever puppy couldn't even open its eyes. It was harmless to humans and animals, so Poplar fruit was not worried. Zhang Yujie didn't want to discuss this issue anymore. She chatted for a while and suddenly said tentatively, Little fruit, today is Christmas. Did you ask any cute girls out to play? Yes. It's Christmas. Poplar fruit looked out of the window. The sky was not dark yet, and it was cold as usual. This year's Christmas had come quietly. If Zhang Yujie hadn't said so, it would probably have left quietly. For the past few years, he had spent Christmas with Lu Yunran. On Christmas Eve, they would go out to watch a movie or eat a big meal, and then walk slowly along the neon-dotted Pearl River. On Christmas Eve, the two would go to a quiet and elegant coffee shop, sweetly opening each other's gifts. This year, would there be someone else by her side? Poplar Fruit didn't know, but he should have come alone. Hey, why aren't you talking? The other side suddenly became quiet. Zhang Yujie thought that the line had been disconnected. Oh, nothing. Poplar Fruit recovered at this time. He smiled slightly and said, "There are no cute girls. We can't spend Christmas Day like this, just stay at home." I see. Zhang Yujie carelessly ignored Poplar Fruit's inexplicable silence. She said regretfully, "If I didn't have to work overtime this week, I would have flown over to play with you." Haha, you don't have to go through so much trouble. Poplar Fruit laughed. It's just a Western holiday. I don't think we have to celebrate it. Hey, aren't you an English student? This holiday is as important as the Spring Festival in the West. Can't you accept it? Zhang Yujie asked curiously. No, it's two different things. Poplar Fruit explained. First of all, it doesn't mean that English students have to celebrate Western holidays. Secondly, I didn't say that I don't accept it. I just feel that there's no need to celebrate a foreign holiday since I'm alone now. I should just relax. No matter what, Zhang Yujie felt that after chatting with Poplar Fruit, her heart calmed down a lot. At least she knew that he had no one by his side. In fact, she really wanted to fly over to accompany Poplar Fruit for this holiday, which in her opinion was quite important. She had even bought a gift. However, the managing editor stopped her at the crucial moment and told her that she had to work overtime for Christmas. Zhang Yujie could only give up. As Zhang Yujie's mother's best friend, although Pang Yu did not expose Zhang Yujie's matter, she had been paying attention to Zhang Yujie's every move. Zhang Yujie was booking a plane ticket and buying a gift when Christmas was approaching. How could that excitement escape her eyes? In order to prevent Zhang Yujie from falling deeper and deeper into an irreversible situation, Pang Yu could only find an excuse to keep Zhang Yujie in Beijing. Although Zhang Yujie kept muttering that Auntie Pang was not loyal, Pang Yu could only insist on doing so. After chatting for a long time, Poplar Fruit was about to cook and bathe Kiki. Zhang Yujie reluctantly said, "That's it then. Merry Christmas." When Poplar Fruit's Merry Christmas came from the other side of the phone, Zhang Yujie happily put down the phone. Chapter 146. Today, Poplar Fruit was particularly active. He came back early from his morning exercise. He did not sit silently in front of the computer after breakfast as he usually did. First, he tidied up the bedroom, living room, and every other room. He folded the quilt, put the cups, and put the books back on the bookshelf. Then, he cleaned the living room. There might be hair shavings hidden in the carpet, so he used the vacuum cleaner to clean every corner. Poplar Fruit also opened the door and windows of the living room. While ventilating, he used a wet towel to wipe the dining table, coffee table, and cabinets. Maybe the dishes on the dining table were not drained last night. There was a circle of white marks on the table. Poplar Fruit also wiped it a few times with a rag. Then, he went to the kitchen. There was a lot of oil on the kitchen hood. Poplar Fruit wiped it again and again. Finally, Poplar Fruit found a dry rag to wipe the water that splashed out from the sink. After doing all this, Poplar Fruit sat down on the sofa in the living room with satisfaction. He looked at the room that became extraordinarily fresh and bright under the blowing of some cold wind. Why did he go through so much trouble? Because Fong Bebe was coming today. Poplar Fruit thought to himself, I have to perform better. I don't want Fong Bebe to think that I'm a decadent man. He felt that he wanted to show Fong Bebe that he could provide a good living environment for Goldie, and not for any other reason. Yes, that was definitely the case. After Kiki got up, Poplar Fruit fed her milk and cleaned up her diapers. He let her play in her amusement park. Poplar Fruit immediately washed the diapers that Kiki changed. He did not wash them at night as usual, because there might be a strange smell in the toilet. Goldie, oh, right. Poplar Fruit gave the golden retriever such a name yesterday. If Kiki could think now, she did not know if she would be glad that Poplar Fruit had a flash of inspiration when he gave her a name. Otherwise, if Poplar Fruit gave her such a vulgar name, she really wanted to cry but had no tears. Poplar Fruit walked through the dining room and passed by its little nest. Goldie might have felt the vibration of his footsteps. It hummed and raised its head from its dog cushion. Awake. Poplar Fruit squatted down and touched Goldie's little head. It still could not open its eyes. Eyelids drooping, it used its head to rub against Poplar Fruit's hand. Goldie opened its mouth and sniffed around. You want to drink milk, right? Poplar Fruit laughed. He stood up and went to the kitchen to take out Goldie's milk bottle. He took out some dog milk that had been prepared and warmed up. Poplar Fruit carried Goldie out and fed it according to the method that Fong Beibei taught him. Goldie had an advantage, and that was that it could eat a lot. This was not only reflected in its appetite. When Poplar Fruit fed it for the first time, it could suck out the milk by itself using the pacifier. There was no need for Poplar Fruit to do anything else. Daddy. Kiki sat on the carpet and played with her toys. When she looked up, she saw the golden retriever in her father's arms. She smiled and shouted, waving her hands. Yes, yes. Poplar Fruit had also fed Goldie. When he heard his daughter's call, he smiled and said, Wait a minute. I'll let Goldie play with you. He wiped Goldie's mouth and checked that there was no excrement on its body. He then carried Goldie over and gently placed it on the carpet beside Kiki. Goldie was put down. Based on its body's senses, it discovered that the surrounding environment had changed. It moved around restlessly and whimpered. Suddenly, a fleshy little hand reached over and pressed on its body. Giggle. Chichi touched the gold and smiled happily. She even raised her head and looked at her father as if she was showing off. Poplar Fruit sat down on the sofa and looked at her with a smile. After Goldie was held down by Chichi, it began to struggle and squirm. Kiki let go of it and then crawled over to lean against Goldie. She was not much bigger than Goldie. Goldie felt the warmth of Kiki's body. Its fear and anxiety slowly calmed down. It snuggled under Chichi's body and stopped moving. Kiki also lay down beside Goldie. She reached out and touched Goldie's back and smiled sweetly. Click. A sound was heard. Kiki looked up at her father. Poplar Fruit was laughing and taking photos of her and Goldie with his iPhone. It was very boring. Kiki turned back to play with Goldie. Poplar Fruit's right thumb and index finger moved up and down on the phone screen. He had a satisfied smile on his face. This is the effect I want. He slightly adjusted the size of the photo and wrote a Weibo post. Fong Beibei had class and called to say that she could not come in the morning. She made an appointment with Poplar Fruit to come later in the afternoon. Then let her stay for dinner. Poplar Fruit was secretly delighted. He ran to the kitchen and opened the fridge. He looked at the ingredients inside and thought about what kind of dishes to cook tonight. He even went out at noon after Kiki fell asleep to buy a few seasonings. Waiting was a long and boring process. At around 3:30, Poplar Fruit sat in the living room and read a book. As he read, Fong Beibei's face popped up in his mind. He could not bear to continue reading. Feeling uneasy, he simply stood up and paced around the living room. Kiki, who was playing with herself in the amusement park, heard the sound and looked up in surprise. She tilted her head and looked at her father in confusion. Since it's like this, let's cook. Poplar Fruit clapped his hands and walked into the kitchen. He took out the pork belly from the fridge and separated the fat from the lean. Then, he cut them into long thin strips. Then, he laid the meat strips on the chopping board and repeatedly chopped them with a kitchen knife until they were minced. Then, he put them into a big bowl and mixed them well with cooking wine. The water chestnuts, that is, the water chestnuts, were also peeled and chopped. Then, he poured them into the minced meat, added salt and starch, and kneaded them. That was not enough. Poplar Fruit put the meat in a fresh-keeping bag and patted it repeatedly. He smeared oil on the clay pot, washed the rice and poured it in. Then, he poured in a certain proportion of water and waited for it to slowly soak for a while. In addition to his signature pot rice, Poplar Fruit also prepared a pot of corn and radish pork ribs soup. After blanching the cut pork ribs, he washed the meat and then added water to boil it with red dates. After the water boiled, the air was soon filled with a tempting meat fragrance. Woo-woo. Goldie's nose was very sharp. When it smelled the meat fragrance, it began to rub restlessly in its cardboard box. Poplar Fruit walked over, squatted down, and happily patted its little head. He said, "Goldie, are you hungry again? But you can't eat meat right now. Don't worry, follow Dad and you'll have a good life. Ha ha." Poplar Fruit mixed milk for it to drink. After playing with it for about 10 minutes, he went back to cook the soup. Just as he poured the cut corn and radish into the soup, Poplar Fruit's phone on the coffee table rang. Kiki heard the theme song of City in the Sky. She happily raised her head and crawled in the direction of the coffee table. Coming, coming. Poplar Fruit was faster than Kiki. As soon as the voice fell, he saw Poplar Fruit rush out of the kitchen like a whirlwind. With a leap, he stepped over Kiki's amusement park of cardboard boxes, then he bent down and grabbed his phone. At this time, he still had the apron on his body. Kiki was crawling when her father suddenly appeared. She was a little surprised. She froze in place, but her little head moved along with her father's figure. En. 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 Poplar Fruit walked back and forth while answering the phone. Okay, I'll be right there. After putting down the phone, Poplar Fruit bent down, put his face in front of Kiki, and said with a smile, "Kiki, Auntie Bebe is coming." Hearing this name, Kiki's eyes lit up. At this time, she was using both hands to support herself on the carpet. She couldn't wave her hands to express her feelings, but from her beaming face, it could be seen that she was very happy. Bebe. Suddenly, Kiki called out these two words. Poplar Fruit was stunned. He never taught Kiki how to say Fong Bebe's name, but Chichi had learned it by herself just like that. She was really too smart. Although Poplar Fruit heard a lot of praises from others, he was still shocked by his daughter's genius performance time and time again. "Father is going to pick up Auntie Bebe. When she arrives later, you must say hello to her." Time was tight, so Poplar Fruit didn't say much to Kiki. He quickly took off the apron and hung it in the kitchen. Then, he took his leather jacket from the bed, put it on, and zipped it up, preparing to leave. "Ah!" Kiki called out anxiously. Poplar Fruit stood at the door and stopped. He thought about it. He couldn't let Kiki be alone at home when she was awake. So, he turned back and put the jacket on Kiki, then wrapped her in a blanket before carrying her out. Although it was afternoon, because it was the 12th lunar month, the air outside was very cold. It was said that it was snowing in the north again. The north wind whistled in Yangcheng, and the temperature dropped by a few degrees. If a person stayed outside for a long time, their hands and feet would feel cold, and their whole body would feel like it was frozen. Poplar Fruit only wore a home long-sleeved t-shirt under the leather jacket, and it wasn't the kind with flannel. He zipped up the leather jacket, but the cold wind still poured into his neck. Only the current Poplar Fruit, he couldn't do it in the past, was so unafraid of the cold. He had internal energy to protect his body, and it was like a warm current flowing through his meridians under his skin. His whole body was warm. After Poplar Fruit walked out, he became more and more anxious. When Fong Bebe called him, she had already arrived. The bus stop was on the street, and there was no cover at all. How cold was she standing there and being blown by the wind? As Yangwa thought about it, her footsteps quickened. When he was about to reach the bus stop, Poplar Fruit saw Fong Bebe leaning on the bus stop sign from afar. Her white clothes were very conspicuous against the dark green bus stop. Chapter 147. When he got closer, Poplar Fruit could see clearly. Fang Bebe didn't wear gloves or a hat. Instead, she wore a white down jacket and white trousers. He didn't know if she had long johns underneath, but these clothes weren't enough in such cold weather. Fong Bebe was rubbing her hands, stamping her feet and shivering. She was leaning against the bus stop sign, but how could a bus stop block the pervasive cold wind? Seeing her face was purple from the wind, Poplar Fruit's heart tightened. Without saying a word, he unzipped his jacket. Although it was a bit troublesome to hold Kiki, he still took off his leather jacket. "Uncle." Fong Bebe looked up and saw Poplar Fruit and called out in surprise. Seeing Poplar Fruit taking off his jacket, she quickly walked over and held Poplar Fruit's hand and said, "What are you doing? Are you crazy? It's so cold." Poplar Fruit pulled his hand out of Fong Beibei's cold hands and said with a smile, "It's okay, I have thick skin." He took off his jacket and covered Fong Beibei's body with it. Poplar Fruit was much taller than Fong Beibei. His jacket was also very long. When it covered Fong Beibei's body, the hem hung down to her knees. "You're wearing so little." Fong Beibei saw Poplar Fruit only had a long-sleeved t-shirt left. She protested and wanted to put the jacket back to Poplar Fruit. "It's really not cold." Poplar Fruit pressed the jacket down without any explanation. Fong Beibei's shoulders and neck were wrapped, only her head was exposed. With Poplar Fruit's jacket covering her body, Fong Beibei seemed to be finally isolated from the biting cold wind outside. She suddenly felt a lot warmer. There was no point in arguing. Instead, it would only make the two of them suffer in the wind for a few more minutes. Unable to dissuade Poplar Fruit, Fong Beibei stretched her arm out of her sleeve and pushed Poplar Fruit's arm. She said, "Let's go. Don't stand here and talk." Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "Okay, come with me." He led Fong Beibei back the way they came. From the bus stop, they still had to take 2 turns to reach the entrance of the residential area. "So it's here. I couldn't find it after looking for a long time," Fong Beibei said with a frown. "Didn't I tell you to tell me a few stops in advance to pick you up?" Poplar Fruit rebuked. They walked into the apartment building. Once they were past the curfew and out of the cold wind, it finally warmed up. Fong Beibei muttered and said, "I thought I could find the way by myself. That way, you wouldn't have to make another trip. Who knew, when I got off the bus, I couldn't find the way. There was no one on the road. I couldn't even ask for directions. Although you didn't have to make a turn, it's not a direct route. After getting off the bus, the road is so complicated." Poplar Fruit pressed the elevator button and nagged, "It's your first time here. You should have let me pick you up." "Okay." Fong Beibei said, "I know." The two of them walked into the elevator. At this time, Kiki heard Fong Beibei's voice. She struggled to stretch out her hand and head from the tight quilt. Poplar Fruit pressed her back. Kiki began to be unhappy. She sadly groaned and showed signs of crying. "Hey, why are you like this?" Fong Beibei saw and scolded. In the elevator, the temperature rose again. Fong Beibei took off Poplar Fruit's jacket and handed it to Poplar Fruit. Then, she reached out for Kiki. She hugged Kiki and pulled the quilt away. She deftly used one hand to wrap the quilt again. This time, after she folded it again, the small quilt was folded into the shape of clothes. Kiki's hand went through the gap of the quilt and then wrapped it again. Not only did it look good, it also did not affect her free movement. The shackles that made her feel uncomfortable had disappeared, and Chichi smiled widely. She took the initiative to hug Fang Beibei's neck, and kissed her on her face that was still a little cold. Being kissed, Fong Beibei was very happy. She held Kiki's little hand and smiled. "Good Kiki, stupid uncle. Good Kiki, stupid uncle." Poplar Fruit looked and was a little jealous. Every time, he had to put his face close to Kiki and coax her for a while before she was willing to kiss him. But facing Fong Beibei, Kiki was so proactive every time. This was too much of a blow to him as a father. "What you did just now was wrong," Fong Beibei explained. "You wrapped Kiki with the quilt like a dumpling, trapping her hands and feet. Her blood vessels were suppressed and unable to circulate. How could she feel comfortable?" Poplar Fruit readily accepted. He listened humbly and nodded like a chick pecking at rice. When they reached home, Poplar Fruit took out the key to open the door. Fong Beibei followed in. She looked around and asked curiously, "Uncle, is your wife not home?" Wife. Poplar Fruit had never heard this word in his life. Poplar Fruit did not react for a moment. He took off his shoes and asked subconsciously, "Your wife, Kiki's mother?" Fong Beibei said. Hearing this word, Kiki remembered that she could say it too. She clapped her hands and said happily, "Mother." "No." Poplar Fruit touched his head and said, "Kiki doesn't have a mother, and I don't have a wife." "Ah." Fong Beibei was confused. She covered Kiki's ears and whispered, "No way? You adopted Kiki?" Poplar Fruit was stunned for a moment. He quickly waved his hand and said, "No, Kiki is my daughter, my biological daughter." "Then how?" Fong Beibei was even more confused. "Who doesn't have a mother? It can't be that she popped out from a crack in a rock, right? It's a long story." Poplar Fruit was a little confused. When facing Fong Beibei, he did not know how to explain it to her. "Kiki's biological mother died when she gave birth to her, but she really isn't my wife. Actually, I'm not close to her," Poplar Fruit said. "That was a mistake, kind of like a one-night stand." When he said this word, Poplar Fruit wanted to slap himself. How could he say that? He was usually good at talking, and he specialized in dealing with words. How could he not know how to speak now? It wasn't a one-night stand, it was drunk. Poplar Fruit found that he was making things worse. Okay, you don't have to explain. I understand," Fong Beibei said. She added in her heart, "Isn't it just a game that rich people often play? Abandoning the woman after playing with her." Fong Beibei frowned. Her heart was still wavering. "That's not right. I don't think Weird Uncle is such a bad person. He's usually quite nice. He's also very nice to the dogs and Kiki. Why would he do something like that? Could there be some misunderstanding? It shouldn't be a misunderstanding, right? Kiki's mother gave birth to his child, but he hasn't married her yet. That's not right. If it weren't for the fact that you're a responsible father, I wouldn't have bothered with Weird Uncle. You understand?" "What do you understand?" Poplar Fruit wanted to cry, but no tears came out. Forget it, there was no need to explain. He simply shut his mouth. Chapter 148. Fong Beibei, with Kiki in her arms, looked at the amusement park that Poplar Fruit decorated for her, and walked over with great interest. Poplar Fruit followed behind, lowered his head, and said, "Watch your step, you have to step over here." Sniffing, Fong Beibei, who was about to lift her right foot, retracted it. She turned her head and asked Poplar Fruit in confusion, "Uncle, are you cooking something?" Poplar Fruit nodded and said, "Yes, I am cooking soup." "With the fire on?" Fong Beibei asked. "Ah." Poplar Fruit felt a little bad. He shrugged his shoulders and said, "It's like this." Fong Beibei pushed him away and went straight to the kitchen. "Puppy lives here," Poplar Fruit shouted from behind when they passed by the dining room. But Fong Beibei ignored him, walked into the kitchen, and looked inside. Poplar Fruit scratched his head, and had to bite the bullet and follow her in. "You left the fire here and ran out." Fong Beibei turned her head and stared at Poplar Fruit, and said angrily, "I thought that it wouldn't matter if I came up quickly." Poplar Fruit explained. "What if you couldn't find me and took a long time?" Fong Beibei scolded. "If the water dried up or boiled out and extinguished the fire, wouldn't it be dangerous?" Fong Beibei was right, it was indeed his fault. Poplar Fruit no longer quibbled, and bowed his head to admit his mistake. In fact, the heater was on in the house, and Fong Beibei soon felt hot. She temporarily handed Kiki back to Poplar Fruit, and took off her down jacket. She was wearing a tight sweater, and when she took off her jacket, her beautiful curves were exposed. Poplar Fruit's eyes were stuck on her like a magnet, and he could not take them off. Fong Beibei looked at him, and said with a smile, "Uncle, do you want me to add the word strange again?" Poplar Fruit was a guest, so he led Fong Beibei to visit the house. There was nothing else to praise. No matter how clean and tidy it was, in the eyes of girls, it was still a bit messy. The only thing that made Fong Beibei stop and marvel was Poplar Fruit's study. Fang Beibei was taken aback by the bookshelves around her and the books on one side of the bookshelves that were already filled with books. "I couldn't tell, Uncle. You are a person who loves to read," Fong Beibei said in surprise. Poplar Fruit was indeed more fond of reading than before. Firstly, it was because he could gain much more from reading than before. His eidetic memory was not just for show, he could absorb the nutrients of the sea of knowledge like a sponge. The more he read, the more excited he became. Secondly, he had enough time to read. In the past, when he worked in a foreign trade company, he had no control over his time, and sometimes he had to socialize. When he returned to his residence, he felt physically and mentally exhausted. With such a tight life, how could he find time to read? It was already good enough that he could squeeze out some time to learn about his line of work. Now, because he had to take care of Kiki, he spent most of his time at home. When he was tired from translating, he could flip through books. This kind of life was too comfortable. Therefore, Poplar Fruit would buy some books online almost every few days. In less than a few months, his bookshelf was already full. After walking out, Fong Beibei took Kiki, sat down on the sofa, and asked, "Uncle, by the way, don't you have to go to work today?" "I don't have to go to work. I am a freelancer, and I usually translate for people." Poplar Fruit laughed. "Oh, no wonder there are so many language books on your bookshelf that I don't understand." Fong Beibei nodded and said, "You don't understand?" Poplar Fruit said doubtfully, "There are still a lot of words written in Chinese. My English is not good. Are you a fellow student?" "It seems to be very high class," Fong Beibei said. She was talking about the abbreviation of simultaneous interpretation. It means that without waiting for the speaker to pause, the interpreter can simultaneously translate the speaker's words to the audience. Simultaneous interpretation is almost the pinnacle of interpretation. Poplar Fruit had not tried this line of work. Of course, he felt that if he was asked to do it now, it should not be a problem. "No, I mainly do translation." Poplar Fruit shook his head and laughed. In the past, Poplar Fruit also considered doing simultaneous interpretation. The income of simultaneous interpretation was much higher than translation. It charged by the hour, and one could earn thousands to tens of thousands of yuan per hour. However, the problem was that they needed to go out frequently, and Yang Guo had no choice. As a single father, and a father like Chichi who couldn't leave his side for even a moment, he could only give up on this option. Of course, if there was a chance in the future, Poplar Fruit would not necessarily do it. Because he was not short of money now, and his interest in translation was getting bigger and bigger. He was more willing to spend more time and effort on more creative work. "That's amazing. How many books have you translated so far?" Fong Beibei said admiringly. Poplar Fruit was a little ashamed. He went to the study room and took out a copy of the biography of Steve Jobs. He handed it to Fong Beibei and said, "Not many, just one, and it's not even a complete book." Poplar Fruit felt that this book was translated with others, so it could not be considered as his translation. "It's this book. A few days ago, a few people in my class bought it." Fong Beibei flipped through it and said in surprise, "So it was you who translated it?" "Just this one." Poplar Fruit said embarrassedly. "That's still very good. You're still young," Fong Beibei said as she patted Poplar Fruit's shoulder like an old man. Kiki saw it, and she groped her way over. She copied Fong Beibei and patted her father's shoulder. Then she giggled and turned around to hug Fong Beibei's neck. Looking at the two people playing around, Poplar Fruit smiled helplessly. "You can translate such a thick book, that's amazing," Fong Beibei said. "My biggest headache right now is English." "Huh." Poplar Fruit was a little puzzled. She said in frustration, "I don't even know how to do my CET4 and CET6 exams. When I took the entrance exam, I got the lowest score and was assigned to the first class." Poplar Fruit was an English major. He didn't take the entrance exam, but he still knew that Higoshiyama University's entrance exam was still a little important. Because which class you were assigned to, it would determine the time to take the CET4 and CET6 exams. The third class was the fastest, and you can take the CET4 exams directly in your freshman year. The first class was a little miserable, and you need to slowly learn from university English. Hearing her say this, Poplar Fruit asked puzzledly, "No way, weren't you admitted in advance? Your grades should be very good." Poplar Fruit himself took the Higoshiyama University's entrance exam when he was in high school, but he didn't pass the first round. "Who said that the early admission results are good?" Fong Beibei rolled her eyes at Poplar Fruit and said, "My grades are not good, and I'm very biased. My English is the worst. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations, everyone use your votes to support the poor." Chapter 149. Oh. Poplar Fruit understood. "Then you were admitted in advance through the competition." Beibei. Kiki saw that Fong Beibei and her father were chatting happily, and neither of them was paying attention to her. She became anxious, and Kiki's little hands wrapped around Fong Beibei's neck. She put her mouth next to her ear and called out coquettishly, "Yes." Fong Beibei answered happily. She hugged Kiki in front of her and kissed her lovingly. She praised, "You know how to call me by my name. You're so smart." "Uncle, when did you teach her?" Fong Beibei asked. Poplar Fruit wanted to say that he taught her, but he felt that it would be too hypocritical. He told her honestly, "I didn't teach her. Maybe she heard too much and learned it herself." Fong Beibei looked at Poplar Fruit in surprise, but did not say anything. Poplar Fruit did not know how ambiguous his words sounded in Fong Beibei's ears. If she learned it as she listened, then how many times must he have whispered Kiki's name in her ear every day? If Poplar Fruit knew, he would probably cry but have no tears. He did not want to. Who asked his daughter to be so smart? She was almost a demon. Fong Beibei and Kiki were having fun. Poplar Fruit smiled, got up, and went to the kitchen. There were still a few steps to the soup. "I couldn't tell, but you're pretty good at it." Poplar Fruit was busy in the kitchen for a while. As he was cutting cucumbers, Fong Beibei's voice suddenly came from the door. Poplar Fruit turned around and saw Fong Beibei standing at the kitchen door with Kiki in her arms, looking at him with a smile. For some reason, looking at her smile, Poplar Fruit felt a rush of excitement. "Haha, I'm alone at home. As I cook every day, my skills have been honed." Poplar Fruit laughed. After that, he turned around and continued to cook. Poplar Fruit said without turning his head, "By the way, aren't you here for a home visit today? Gold's nest is in the dining room. Do you see it?" "I see it." Fong Beibei said, "I saw it when I came in. I saw that it was sleeping soundly, so I didn't disturb it." Fong Beibei suddenly frowned and asked, "Jinzi? Who gave it this name? It's so unpleasant." I gave it a name." Poplar Fruit looked back at her with a little embarrassment. "Is it not good?" "It's not bad, it just feels too vulgar." Fong Beibei thought for a while and said, "Is it?" Poplar Fruit explained, "I think it's pretty good. Jinzi is originally a golden retriever. In the future, its fur will be golden. Also, it's called Jinzi because we think it's very precious and important to us." "If you say it like that, then it's fine." Fong Beibei said, "It's just that I feel that it has something to do with money." "Then can you help to give it a name?" Poplar Fruit laughed happily. Fong Beibei gave him a dirty look and said, "No, we have so many dogs. I've named it so many times. I'm getting tired of it. Do you have a dog called Jinzi?" Poplar Fruit asked. "No." "Then let's call it Jinzi. It's so unique, right?" Poplar Fruit laughed. "It's probably the only one in the world." "How is that possible?" Fong Beibei said, "But it's okay to call it Jinzi the puppy. I think the more I call it, the better it sounds." Hee hee. "By the way, are you going to have dinner here tonight before going back?" Poplar Fruit laughed. No need to be so troublesome. I'll go back after sitting for a while." Fong Beibei quickly waved her hand and said. Poplar Fruit said, "It's not troublesome. Look, my vegetables are all washed here. It's no trouble. But it'll be too late to go back by then." Fong Beibei said, "It'll take an hour to go back by bus." "It's okay, I'll do it right away. It's not even 5 o'clock yet. Let's eat early, and then I'll send you to the bus. I promise it won't be too late." Poplar Fruit said. "But..." Fong Beibei was still a little hesitant. Seeing this, Poplar Fruit took out his trump card and said, "Kiki, quickly call Beibei. Ask Aunt Beibei to stay for dinner." Hearing her father's call, Kiki was very obedient. She called out crisply, "Beibei." Every time she called Beibei, she was very happy. It could be heard from the volume of her voice. Okay, I won't go." Fong Beibei's heart softened. She laughed and said, "But, Kiki, don't listen to your father's nonsense. You should call Sister Beibei. Sister Beibei is not that old." Yes. "You're young and beautiful, lively and lovely, 18 years old." Poplar Fruit flattered. "That's right, I'm 18 years old. Fong Beibei said proudly. Since Fong Beibei stayed for dinner, Poplar Fruit did not stay idle. He quickly began to cook the prepared steamed rice. He put the rice and water into the casserole and boiled it over a large fire. After more than 10 minutes, when the rice and water were boiled, small holes appeared on the surface. Poplar Fruit continued to cook the meat patty on the surface. After cooking for a while, he cracked 2 eggs and covered it with the lid. When the meat patty was about 80% cooked, Poplar Fruit turned off the fire and let it continue to simmer against the residual heat of the casserole. During the cooking process, Poplar Fruit did not stay idle. He tossed the oil pan to cook other dishes. Finally, he boiled a few small vegetables with hot water and took them out to drain. The sauce was the key to making steamed rice. The sauce was made with water, light soy sauce, fish sauce, soy sauce, salt, sugar, and other ingredients. It did not need too much, just a small bowl would be enough. After the steamed rice had been simmering for more than 10 minutes, Poplar Fruit opened the lid and added the boiled vegetables. Then, he evenly poured the sauce over them. As soon as the sauce was poured over, the aroma of the steamed rice immediately overflowed. Even the closed kitchen door could not hide it. Woo woo. Goldie, who smelled the aroma in its sleep, began to kick its legs and cry out. Fong Beibei could not stop laughing. When the dishes were ready, Poplar Fruit placed them on the table one by one. At this time, his cell phone suddenly rang. It was a call from the express delivery. After hanging up the phone, Poplar Fruit hesitated for a moment and said to Fong Beibei, "Beibei, help me take care of Kiki at home. I'm going out to get the express delivery. Don't worry, I'll be back soon." He did not want to go out with Kiki in the quilt again. Moreover, he trusted Fong Beibei quite a lot. "Okay, no problem." Fong Beibei smiled and said, "Hey, put on your clothes." Poplar Fruit, who had just opened the door, turned around. Fong Beibei led him to the leather jacket hanging on the stool and threw it to him. Poplar Fruit took the jacket, smiled at her, and went out. Poplar Fruit arrived at the entrance of the neighborhood and realized that he had been tricked by the express delivery guy. He had not arrived yet. In the end, the express delivery guy made Poplar Fruit wait for almost 15 minutes. In fact, waiting was not a big deal. Poplar Fruit was just worried that if he left for too long, Kiki would go crazy. He had tried. From the moment Kiki was born until now, when she was awake, Kiki could not leave her father's side. Even her own mother could not. As long as she did not see her father, she would cry and make a fuss. Of course, the press conference was an exception. Kiki thought that the Poplar Fruit on the big screen was her father in real life. However, there was no big screen at home now. Moreover, Poplar Fruit did not bring his cell phone out. When he finally got the express delivery, Poplar Fruit, who was burning with anxiety, jogged all the way. He thought that when he reached the door, he would hear Kiki's heartbreaking cries. However, when he opened the door, Poplar Fruit did not hear anything. He only saw Fong Beibei at the dining table, acting coquettishly in Kiki's arms and having fun with Fong Beibei. "You're back. You've been gone for so long." Fong Beibei smiled and said. "What happened?" Poplar Fruit asked in confusion. "What do you mean what happened?" Fong Beibei was confused by his question. "Kiki," Poplar Fruit said, "she didn't cry and make a fuss." "No, she was fine the whole time." Fong Beibei smiled and said. "That's not right," Poplar Fruit said. This was too strange. It was the first time that Kiki did not cry and make a fuss after being away from her father for so long. It was too illogical. It was like the sun that rose in the east and set in the west suddenly rose in the west. "Seriously, isn't it a good thing that your child doesn't cry and make a fuss?" Fong Beibei said unhappily. "Don't tell me you're hoping that Kiki will cry. You're underestimating me." Poplar Fruit explained, "No, that's not what I meant. Kiki is like this." He spent a few minutes to explain Kiki's situation clearly. "That's pretty good." Fong Beibei covered her mouth and laughed. "This means that Kiki and I are very close." Poplar Fruit laughed and said, "It seems like that's true. I feel that the two of you are two-fated." Suddenly, Poplar Fruit thought of something that he was worried about before. "Beibei, Poplar Fruit sat beside Bebe and said, Can you do me a favor? Poplar Fruit said hesitantly, What favor? Since Kiki likes to play with you so much, can you help me take care of her? Just for 2 days. Poplar Fruit said. Ah. Fong Bebe was a little confused. Do you have something urgent tomorrow? Not tomorrow. Poplar Fruit said, It's next week. Poplar Fruit explained in detail. It turned out that next Wednesday was the National Master's exam. Poplar Fruit had been hesitating about what to do. His original plan was to ask his godmother to help take care of him so that he could finish the exam earlier. But now, he had a better choice. Wow, you're going to take the postgraduate exam? Fong Bebe said in surprise. Yes, I'm going to take the postgraduate exam at our Higoshiyama University. Poplar Fruit said with a smile, How about it? Can you help me? You don't have to come here. My exam is at the school. You can help me take care of it at the school. After the exam, I'll treat you to a meal. Even if you don't treat me to a meal, I'll help you. Fong Bebe rolled her eyes at him and said, We can be considered friends. Since we're friends, don't say such things. It's too vulgar. Poplar Fruit said apologetically, Okay. It's my fault. So, you agree? Yes. Isn't it just helping you take care of Kiki? I still want to play with her more. Fong Bebe used her finger to tease Kiki's little neck. Kiki's neck was itchy and shrunk back. Then she stretched out her little hand and wanted to grab Fong Bebe's finger. Fong Bebe suddenly pulled back her hand when she was about to grab Kiki's finger. But Kiki was not angry. She laughed happily. Gaga, hihi, all kinds of laughter could be heard. Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. Chapter 150. You want to take the postgraduate entrance exam? Why don't I see any postgraduate entrance exam books in your study? Fong Bebe asked doubtfully. She had seen many senior brothers and sisters who took the postgraduate entrance exam. They were all very diligent. They spent all day in the library or study room, doing one exercise book after another. I might be a little different from the others who took the postgraduate entrance exam. Poplar Fruit thought for a moment and explained, I can take the postgraduate entrance exam without reviewing a lot of things. These knowledge are usually memorized by heart. Only politics needs to be reviewed. I also reviewed that. The book was left in my hometown and I didn't bring it back. Oh, I see. Fong Bebe didn't know much about the postgraduate entrance exam. She was only in the first semester of her undergraduate degree. How could she think so far ahead? Let's eat. Poplar Fruit got up, took off his coat and hung it back in the bedroom. Then he said to Fong Bebe, Kiki, sit here. Poplar Fruit carried Kiki's baby seat out. Kiki was carried in so that Fong Bebe could wash her hands and eat. After washing the dishes, they drank the soup first. Poplar Fruit gave Fong Bebe a big bowl of pork ribs and corn soup. Fong Bebe said, Ari, okay. Don't eat too much. I can't eat anymore. Poplar Fruit made 2 dishes and a soup today. It sounded a little small, but with the pot of rice, it was more than enough for 2 people to eat. Wow. Uncle, you are so good. The color, smell, and taste are perfect. Fong Bebe praised the dishes on the table while drinking the soup. Especially the pot of rice. The green vegetables were dotted on the egg yolk and meat patty. It was fragrant and beautiful, making people drool. Eat. Poplar Fruit scooped a big bowl of pot of rice and gave it to Fong Bebe. He handed the chopsticks and smiled. Well, it's delicious. Fong Bebe said, You should eat too. Poplar Fruit took out a glass of warm milk from the kitchen. He fed it to Kiki and smiled at Fong Bebe. It was also time for Kiki to eat. He couldn't let Kiki watch them eat with an empty stomach. It's okay. You eat first. I'll be done soon. Poplar Fruit smiled. After feeding Kiki, Poplar Fruit went to the table to eat with Fong Bebe. By the way, you mentioned that you won a prize in a competition. What kind of competition was that? Poplar Fruit chatted with Fong Bebe while eating. Mathematics. Fong Bebe said. Mathematics? So powerful. What prize did you get? Poplar Fruit asked. Wait. Fong Beibei said with her mouth stuffed with food. So powerful. Poplar Fruit was shocked. He couldn't imagine that the beautiful girl in front of him had won the first prize in the National High School Mathematics League. Although he studied liberal arts, he was no stranger to this competition. When he was in high school, he had a good friend who studied this. Poplar Fruit saw his friend's problem book. It was completely beyond the scope of human beings. He couldn't understand the Fermat point, the principle of inclusivity and exclusion, and Chebyshev's inequalities. The maze of formulas even made him doubt education. Was the mathematics they were learning the same subject as the mathematics he was learning? Poplar Fruit's good friend took the exam for 2 years. His best result was only the 3rd prize. You know, his mathematics results were usually ranked 1st or 2nd in school. At least, during the 3 years that Poplar Fruit was in school, no one in his high school had won the 1st prize. But Fong Beibei won the 1st prize. Poplar Fruit didn't know how to describe his surprise. Actually, there was one thing that Fong Beibei didn't say. Not only did she win the 1st prize, but her competition results were also among the best in Guangdong province. Because of this, she was selected to participate in the Chinese Mathematical Olympiad and the National High School Mathematics Winter Camp. The participants of this winter camp were basically all admitted to the key universities. If Fong Beibei wasn't too biased in her subject and her results were too bad, she wouldn't have been admitted to Shiremu University and Beijing University. Otherwise, she wouldn't have fallen to the point where she could only go to Higoshiyama University. Exaggeration. In the winter camp, Fong Beibei's results were also very good. In the final competition, she actually squeezed into the top 60 and was selected by the national training team. This was an amazing thing. Although it wasn't considered the national team, it was still a national team. Thinking about it, the annual training list of the National Olympic team for football and basketball, everyone understood the value of this training team. It was a pity that Fong Beibei didn't make it to the end. Her results were far from the top 6, and the top 6 Olympiad geniuses were selected to represent the country in the International Mathematical Olympiad. Even if Fong Beibei didn't make it to the national team, she was still very good. At least, in the field of mathematics, even if Poplar Fruit became smarter, he still didn't dare to touch it. So, are you still studying mathematics? Poplar Fruit asked. Yes, mathematics and applied mathematics major, mainly in the field of mathematics. Fong Beibei smiled. Then what are you studying? Poplar Fruit asked curiously, what are the main courses? Now I'm still building the foundation, but I'm also slowly learning ordinary differential equations, complex variable functions, functional analysis, abstract algebra, differential geometry, and so on. Fong Beibei smiled. Poplar Fruit only felt that a few crows were flying in the sky. His eyes were rolling, but he didn't understand at all. Ha ha, Fong Beibei looked at him, put down her chopsticks, and laughed. You don't understand, right? Yes, yes. Yang sighed and nodded. She didn't know what he was talking about. What you guys are learning is too advanced. No, I think you're the amazing one, Fong Beibei said. Your English should have passed the 8th grade, but I'm still worried about English. I don't want to fail at the end of the semester, and if I can't pass the 4th or 6th grade, I won't be able to graduate in the future. Who told you that you can't graduate if you pass the 4th or 6th grade? Poplar Fruit smiled. Isn't that right? But it will also affect your postgraduate studies, Fong Beibei said. That's true. Poplar Fruit nodded and said, in fact, most people in Higoshiyama University can pass the 6th grade before they graduate, so you don't have to worry. You don't know how bad my English is, Fong Beibei said unhappily. Poplar Fruit rolled his eyes and said, how about I tutor you in English? Fong Beibei was stunned and said, no, you don't have to. You're quite far from here, and it's not good to always trouble you. It's no trouble. You've already helped me look after Kiki, and if I tutor you, Kiki can often play with you. How good is that? She usually plays alone, so she's so lonely. Poplar Fruit said, I don't have to live here. When I'm a postgraduate student, I have to find a house near the school to go to school, so it's convenient. Poplar Fruit said, Then it's settled. After I take the postgraduate entrance exam, I'll tutor you. I guarantee that you'll pass the 4th or 6th grade without any worries. Haha. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations, everyone use your votes to support the poor. Chapter 151. Poplar Fruit said that he wanted to tutor Fong Beibei. Fong Beibei didn't agree, but she didn't refuse either. Poplar Fruit didn't pursue it. Although he had the intention, he could only treat it as a joke. After all, the two of them weren't that close. After dinner, Fong Beibei helped Poplar Fruit change Kiki's diaper, while Poplar Fruit washed the dishes in the kitchen. Kiki wasn't so stable in Fong Beibei's hands. She kept moving around. She always thought that Fong Beibei was playing games with her. The laughter didn't stop until Poplar Fruit wiped his hands clean and Fong Beibei finished changing the diaper. Beibei. There. Kiki suddenly shouted in Fong Beibei's arms. Fong Beibei turned to look at Poplar Fruit in confusion. Poplar Fruit smiled and explained to her, Kiki wants you to take her to her toys. She wants to play with you. Poplar Fruit pointed in the direction that Kiki pointed. But Poplar Fruit picked up his phone to look at the time and said, it's getting late. I should send you back. Kiki, let's play next time. Kiki didn't understand what her father was saying. She saw that the two of them ignored her and showed signs of preparing to go out. She became anxious and cried, ahoom. Although there were no tears, the way she jumped in Fang Beibei's arms was torturous. Fong Beibei hesitated and said, let's play for a while more. She carried Kiki back to Kiki's amusement park. As soon as Kiki was put down, she immediately crawled to her pile of toys. She looked left and right, picked one up and put it down, picked one up and put it down again. It didn't seem like she wanted to continue playing. Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei were a little confused. They squatted by the side and watched. After squatting for a while, Poplar Fruit began to be distracted. Fong Beibei's hair wasn't very long, but when it was spread out, it looked dark and beautiful. It also exuded a faint fragrance. It definitely didn't smell like rouge perfume. Fong Beibei never put on makeup. Poplar Fruit could tell. It also didn't smell like shampoo, because it wasn't outstanding, but it was faintly seductive. Poplar Fruit was a little distracted. He looked at Fong Beibei's beautiful ears from the corner of his eye, but he didn't dare to look more. He still remembered the experience of peeping at Fong Beibei at the stray dog rescue station a few days ago. At this time, Kiki finally found the one she was looking for from her pile of toys, a Barbie doll in a green dress. After finding the Barbie doll, Kiki turned around and stuffed it into Fong Beibei's hands. Then she sat there and laughed. Ah! Fong Beibei was a little surprised. She asked, Kiki, did you give this to me? Poplar Fruit, who had just recovered, was even more surprised. He knew that this Barbie doll was Kiki's most precious toy. Poplar Fruit still remembered that time when he went to the mall to buy clothes with Kiki. She took a fancy to this Barbie doll in a green dress at first glance, and then held it tightly and refused to let go. After they came back, Kiki could be said to have hugged it to eat, sleep, and wouldn't let her father touch it. So far, the situation had eased a little, but this Barbie doll was still Kiki's favorite toy, no other toy. She seems to want to give it to you. Poplar Fruit scratched his head and said a little uncertainly, but this toy is her favorite, so I'm not sure. Maybe she wants you to play with her. Kiki, let's play. Fong Beibei happily sat down, handed the Barbie doll, and said, woo woo. Kiki shook her head and pushed Fong Beibei's hand back. Beibei. She tilted her head and thought for a while. She didn't know how to express herself, so she pointed at Fong Beibei and anxiously called out. Maybe she wants to give it to you. Poplar Fruit said with some jealousy. It was another first. Kiki's first time giving something she liked to someone else, and it was actually not to her father who loved her the most. Why did all the good things go to Fong Beibei? Kiki, you're so nice. Fong Beibei was very touched as she hugged Kiki in front of her and kissed her little face. Beibei Jejia likes it very much, thank you. Poplar Fruit, who was squatting at the side, clearly saw Fong Beibei's eyes filled with tears. Suddenly, That bit of conflict and unhappiness disappeared. Fong Beibei had to go back to school in the end. After all, she was still a student. Poplar Fruit handed over a small blanket and let Fong Beibei wrap Kiki up, then carried her over. After Fong Beibei put on her windbreaker, she carried Kiki over, somewhat reluctant to let go. Along the way, the night was as dark as ink, and the cold wind was bleak. Fong Beibei carried Kiki and walked in front with a smile, while Poplar Fruit followed behind with a smile, silently guarding. Looking at their happy faces, Poplar Fruit sighed, and also had some nostalgia. Although he didn't understand it clearly, he still faintly wanted to continue walking on this road without an end. There was no end to the road, only a turn. After a turn, they were out of the community. Poplar Fruit naturally wouldn't let Fong Beibei take the bus back. It was freezing cold, and after getting off the bus, they still had to walk a long way. He didn't care about Fong Beibei's objection and stopped a taxi for her. After opening the door, Poplar Fruit estimated the price and gave the driver 100 yuan as the fare. However, money wasn't something that he was conflicted about. What he was conflicted about was saying goodbye at this time. Fong Beibei hugged Kiki tightly, kissed her cold little face, and said, "Kiki, Beibei Jejia is going back. Next time, Beibei Jejia will come and play with Kiki, okay?" Kiki didn't understand at all, but she faintly felt that something was wrong. She grabbed Fong Beibei's collar and hung on her body, unwilling to let go. Poplar Fruit scratched his head. Fong Beibei was outside on the balcony as she called Poplar Fruit with a smile. "I still have to thank you for calling a taxi. It sent me directly downstairs." "It's okay. It's good that you're back safely." Poplar Fruit wasn't in the mood to respond to Fong Beibei. He looked at Kiki, who was still crying, with heartache. "Hey, why do I hear crying?" Fong Beibei asked in confusion. Yes, Kiki was crying very hard. Poplar Fruit reluctantly pulled up the corner of his mouth and said, "She cried when you went back. She cried until now." "Aya, why did Kiki cry for so long?" Fong Beibei asked anxiously. "I guess she saw you go back and couldn't bear to cry." Poplar Fruit sighed. "Let me talk to Kiki," Fong Beibei said. "Put it on speaker." Poplar Fruit took the phone from his ear, pressed the speaker icon, and said, "Okay, you say it." Fong Beibei's voice soon came from the speaker. "Kiki, I'm Sister Beibei. Why are you crying again? You're not obedient when you cry." "En." Kiki cried and cried. When she heard Fong Beibei's voice, her crying stopped abruptly. Only a little sobbing sound was left. She turned her head and looked at the source of the sound. It was the phone that her father often held. "That's right, not crying like this is a good child." Fong Beibei laughed and said, "Kiki, call Beibei to Sister Beibei." Kiki didn't understand, but this time she was sure that it was Fong Beibei's voice. She excitedly shouted, "Beibei. En, Kiki is so obedient." Fong Beibei laughed happily. "Yi ya." Kiki looked at the phone and happily shouted. Although there were still sparkling tears on her eyelashes, the heavy smile made her beautiful big eyes curved into crescent moons. Chapter 152. Poplar Fruit smiled as he watched Kiki holding the phone and babbling to Fong Beibei non-stop. Kiki didn't understand what Fong Beibei was saying, and Fong Beibei didn't understand what Kiki meant, but the two of them chatted happily. It wasn't until Kiki was tired and slowly fell asleep listening to Fong Beibei's nursery rhymes on the phone that Poplar Fruit hung up the phone with Fong Beibei. Kiki stopped crying, and Poplar Fruit finally let out a sigh of relief. He wiped her tears and carried her back to the crib to sleep. Looking at the smile on Kiki's face, Poplar Fruit felt that Kiki must have dreamed of Fong Beibei. However, in Kiki's dream, was her father still with her? He didn't know. Of course, Poplar Fruit thought so. When he woke up the next day, Poplar Fruit was still looking after Kiki anxiously, worried that she would cry if she didn't see Fong Beibei. However, it was obvious that Poplar Fruit's worry was unnecessary. How could a child's brain remember so many things? After drinking the milk, Chichi began to play happily in her amusement park again. This matter was considered over. However, there was still a side effect. This was something that Poplar Fruit discovered later. Kiki began to be interested in his phone. If the phone fell into Kiki's hands, she would look at it and press randomly, as if trying to find Fong Beibei. Even if Kiki saw it when he was on the phone, it would be terrible. She would immediately drop the toy in her hand, crawl to her father's side, and hug her father's ankle like a koala bear. Then, she would raise her head and look at her father with eager eyes. Beibei. Sometimes, she would simply stretch out her hand and call out, "It's not Beibei." Poplar Fruit covered the microphone and said to Kiki, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. However, Kiki only understood the two words Beibei. She became more and more excited. She tugged at her father's trousers and kept shouting, "Beibei." Poplar Fruit was so annoyed that he had to call Fong Beibei and let them have a good chat. Later, Poplar Fruit began to make phone calls while hiding from Kiki. Only then did things calm down. Winter was not a good time to go out. Other than working hard at home as a translator and earning more money, Poplar Fruit also began to study various kung fu manuals online. Poplar Fruit felt that his martial arts training was not completely useless after he had a real fight with someone at the bank. What was even more profound was that the internal Tai Chi that he practiced was so awesome. His whole body was like a loach. None of the opponent's punches and kicks landed on him. On the other hand, he relied on his internal strength to burst out his strength. Not only did he beat the opponent to the point where they couldn't fight back, but he could also smash the tiles on the floor of the bank lobby. However, he had been practicing Tai Chi for a long time. Many of the moves were memorized in his heart. He could even use them as a conditioned reflex. If he continued to practice, it would only be like this. After witnessing the ferocity of Muay Thai, Poplar Fruit's horizons were broadened a lot. Although Muay Thai was not as good as the internal Tai Chi that he practiced, its moves were not without merit. For example, Tai Chi focused on borrowing strength to fight strength. It pursued the weak to defeat the strong. However, this was based on the situation where the opponent was stronger than him. In fact, Poplar Fruit's strength was not weak at all. Borrowing the strength of others to fight back sometimes made him feel that his strength was useless. Muay Thai was different. Muay Thai pursued extreme speed and strength. Punches, kicks, knees, and elbows were very smooth. It was able to fully display the strength of the human body. The attack power and lethality were very good. This was exactly what Tai Chi did not have. Of course, it did not mean that Poplar Fruit had to practice Muay Thai just because Muay Thai was good. Muay Thai was a type of martial arts. It required one to improve through mutual attacks. It required one to train one's muscles and bones. This actually consumed a lot of one's vitality. Poplar Fruit would not practice Muay Thai. He was only interested in the moves of Muay Thai. For example, the stab kick, wheel kick, chain kick, and so on that he saw in the bank could be used as a reference for Poplar Fruit's own martial arts. Muay Thai was only a small direction. In fact, Poplar Fruit wanted to understand the various martial arts styles of China over the past 5,000 years. Chinese martial arts had a long history. In the words of the government, it was a precious cultural heritage accumulated and enriched by the working people of China over a long period of time. In fact, it was a variety of martial arts techniques that were slowly accumulated and formed in the long struggle against foreign enemies, against the government, and against thieves. If one were to talk about how many styles there were in Chinese martial arts, it was really uncountable. Tai Chi was also a small pebble in the long river of history. It was just that it withstood the elimination of time and was carried forward in the modern era, becoming widely known. Other than Shaolin, Wudang, Amei, Southern Fist, and other famous styles, there were also various small sects or martial arts passed down in families. Thanks to the popularity of various martial arts novels in the 20th century, more and more people paid attention to martial arts. However, the martial arts that they understood, or the martial arts that they saw on TV or silver screen, were not moves that were seriously used to kill enemies. Think about it, by the time you used these fancy moves, the enemy would have already beaten you to a pulp. What was the use of looking good? Poplar Fruit searched the internet for a long time before he found a few decent martial arts manuals among all kinds of flowery racks, Xingyi Quan, Wing Chun, and Drunken Quan, which was a combination of performance and actual combat. These martial arts were all famous, and their martial arts halls were not uncommon in big cities. It was not unusual for some of the moves to be spread on the internet. Poplar Fruit first began to study Xingyi Quan, which was as famous as Tai Chi. Xingyi Quan focused on short fights and straight attacks, which was the opposite of Tai Chi. However, Poplar Fruit was still very interested in it. Perhaps it could make up for the shortcomings of Tai Chi in close combat. Xingyi Quan used the 5 elements: boxing, hack, collapse, drill, cannon, cross, and the 12 forms: boxing, dragon, tiger, monkey, horse, chicken, hawk, swallow, snake, bird, eagle, bear, as the basic fist techniques. These were all teaching videos that could be found on the internet. It was not difficult to learn the moves of Xingyi Quan, but Xingyi Quan only had the shape and not the intent of the fist. The intent of the heart, the direction of the intent is the fist. Without the intent, the fist would lose its direction and power. When Yonghua learned Xingyi martial arts, she encountered a problem in this area. The martial arts manual said, hack fist has the intent of chopping things like an axe, collapse fist has the intent of shooting things like an arrow, tiger form has the courage of a fierce tiger pouncing on its prey, snake form has the intent of flying on grass. However, no matter how much Poplar Fruit practiced, he could not find the feeling. In fact, Poplar Fruit could be considered to be a fast learner. Ever since he started learning Xingyi Quan, it had only been a few days, but he had already learned the moves. However, if he wanted to go further, he would have to rely on his own comprehension, or he would need the guidance of a master of Xingyi Quan. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations, everyone use your votes to support the poor. Chapter 153. It was time to separate. Poplar Fruit looked at his watch. The exam would start in half an hour. He said goodbye to Fong Beibei and the others, but he looked back every 10 steps. He looked at Kiki in Fong Beibei's arms with some worry and reluctance until he walked out of sight. Fong Beibei, under the cover of her roommates, a few of them surrounded her, avoided the sharp eyes of the dormitory manager, and slipped upstairs. Walking up the stairs, Fong Beibei complained as she walked, "How can you be like this? Isn't it just a small favor? It's nothing. Why are you making him spend so much money? How is it a small favor? He went to the exam, and you helped him take care of his child. This is a big favor," Liu Ruhua said, "and we are actually helping you test him. That's right, to see if he is sincere to you." Liu Lei then added, "If he is sincere, then he won't be reluctant to part with this small amount of money." Fong Beibei didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and said, "What are you thinking? I have nothing to do with him. We have only met a few times. We are just friends. I can testify that you have known Poplar Fruit for a long time." The little spy, Lin Xingshan, raised her hand and laughed. Liu Ruhua said, "I think he is quite interested in you. It is obvious that the way he looks at you is different from how he looks at us. I also think that you two are quite compatible when you stand together." Liu Lei laughed and said, "One is a handsome guy, and the other is a beautiful girl. Don't talk nonsense. If others hear it, you can't even be friends with him." Fong Beibei frowned and said. At this time, Wu Yani, who had been silent, said faintly, "Even if he is a handsome guy, he has a child. Do you still want to push Beibei into the fire pit?" Wu Yani usually didn't talk much, but she often hit the nail on the head. The lively atmosphere suddenly cooled down. Everyone was silent. It was Fong Beibei who broke the silence. She smiled and said, "Hey, you guys, why are you worrying so much? There's really nothing between me and him. Don't overcomplicate everything." Walking into the dormitory, Liu Ruhua sighed and said, "Why are all the good grass being eaten by other cows these days?" "That's because you're not a cow yet." Liu Lei giggled and ran up to Liu Ruhua. She grabbed the small mounds in front of Liu Ruhua's chest and said with a lewd smile. On the other hand, when Poplar Fruit arrived at the examination hall, most of the candidates had already entered. He took out his ID and admission ticket for the invigilator to verify before finding his seat. This was an old school building. The desks were very old and creaked when he sat down. Poplar Fruit took out a pen and placed it on the table. He looked around the examination room. The examinees all had grave expressions on their faces. Although the competition for the postgraduate examination was not as fierce as the college entrance examination, it was not easy either. Not everyone was like Poplar Fruit. They had been revising day and night for at least a year just for these 2 days. If they failed, they could only take the exam next year or not take the exam at all. The price of failure was too high for them. They could not relax at all. Preparing for the exam, Poplar Fruit turned off his phone and handed it to the podium. An invigilator kept it in an envelope and asked Poplar Fruit to write his name. After handing over the phone, Yang suddenly felt that her heart was empty, unable to reach the ground. Without his phone, it meant that he would not be able to receive any news about Kiki in these few hours. Poplar Fruit began to worry. He was worried that Kiki would cry in these few hours. If she cried, her voice would definitely be hoarse after 3 hours. He was worried that Kiki would scratch herself in the female dormitory. The female dormitory had a lot of small things and appliances, and Kiki was so active. He was worried that Fong Beibei would forget his instructions and not feed Kiki on time. It was 3 hours. What if Kiki was hungry? Why were the exam papers not given out yet? Poplar Fruit was anxious. He sat on the chair and twisted around, looking left and right. He was restless. His behavior quickly attracted the attention of the invigilators. They had pretended to walk past Poplar Fruit a few times and carefully observed Poplar Fruit's drawers and movements. Of course, they did not find any evidence of cheating. However, they still listed Poplar Fruit as a key target. Poplar Fruit was very young. He was only 23 or 24 years old. However, after a year of experience in society and having a daughter, his temperament was much more mature. Compared to other examinees of the same age, he looked more suspicious of cheating. After receiving the exam papers, Poplar Fruit's heart suddenly calmed down. He thought it through. Kiki had always been by his side, but that was not a problem. She needed to learn to face the situation when her father was not around. Moreover, since he had chosen to take the exam, he should not let his imagination run wild. He should focus on doing the questions and finish the exam early. It was more effective than sitting here and worrying. The first test in the morning was comprehensive English. The difficulty of the questions was similar to Poplar Fruit's CET 8 English major exam. However, for the current Poplar Fruit, it was really too easy. The complicated reading questions that others might find difficult or even pull their hair out were easily solved by Poplar Fruit as if they were eating a normal meal. He could basically see the answers to the choice, close, and reading comprehension questions at a glance. As for the translation and writing questions, Poplar Fruit only needed to ponder for a moment before he continued to write vigorously. During the whole process, Poplar Fruit's pen did not stop at all. It looked as if he knew the answers. The invigilator stood beside Poplar Fruit. He knew very well that Poplar Fruit could not copy the answers, but Poplar Fruit's performance in answering the questions really shocked him. The invigilator on the podium also noticed. He sighed in his heart and thought silently, is he just going to randomly choose the questions? Why give up treatment? Poplar Fruit finished the exam papers that others might not be able to finish in 3 hours. Yang didn't even need to flip through the paper to check it again. He just closed his eyes and went through the answers in his memory. After correcting 2 mistakes, he began to put the pen cap back on and started to pack up. Under the astonished gazes of the audience, Poplar Fruit walked to the podium and handed in his paper. He then smiled at the invigilator and walked out with his phone. Poplar Fruit walked out of the examination hall and also received a lot of attention. The parents who were standing under the trees to avoid the cold wind pointed at Poplar Fruit and whispered, "Here comes another one. Yeah, even if you don't do well, don't give up halfway." The parents whispered bitterly. Before Poplar Fruit, someone ran out crying and shouting. It looked like he could not continue and had a mental breakdown. The parents felt that Poplar Fruit was in the same situation as the other examinee, just a little calmer. Poplar Fruit did not notice and did not care about other people's gazes. He picked up his phone and called Fong Beibei. Chapter 154. Fong Beibei couldn't believe her ears when she received Poplar Fruit's call. She looked at the time. It had only been less than an hour and a half. In addition to Fong Beibei's voice, Poplar Fruit also heard Kiki laughing happily for some reason. At this time, his hanging heart finally settled down. Fong Beibei was very dissatisfied with Poplar Fruit's worry. She didn't let Poplar Fruit come over. You don't even focus on the exam. Taking care of a child isn't like you. How can you follow her every day? As an adult, do you still have your own life? You have to know when to let go. You always say that Kiki loves to cry and throw tantrums after leaving you, but she's fine now. Why don't you let her try a day without you by her side? Fong Beibei lectured. Today, you have to take the exam properly. You're not allowed to call before 5 p.m. After 5 p.m., I'll bring Kiki back to you in one piece. Poplar Fruit stood on the road outside the exam hall. He stared blankly at the phone that had been hung up. He was motionless like a statue. The parents next to him saw this and sighed again. After being in a daze for a while, Poplar Fruit smiled bitterly and walked away. Since Fong Beibei said so, what else could he do? Moreover, hearing Kiki's voice and knowing that she was in a good condition, Poplar Fruit was relieved. Perhaps, like what Fong Beibei said, letting go at an appropriate time wasn't necessarily a bad thing. At noon, Poplar Fruit went to a hotel outside the school and booked 2 days of rest. Because the cheaper hostels and hotels had been booked early, Poplar Fruit could only choose the most expensive room, which cost 388 yuan a day. The second exam was foreign language. At this level, the French exam was as simple as elementary school English questions. Poplar Fruit finished his paper early and walked out of the exam hall. He was anxious, but he held it in. He sat on the stone chair next to the exam hall and waited until 5 p.m. Kiki was later carried down by Fong Beibei. She had a lot of fun today. She didn't sleep at noon and only fell asleep in the afternoon. When Poplar Fruit saw his daughter, she was still immersed in sweet dreams. Even her closed mouth revealed a trace of a smile. Poplar Fruit's feelings at this moment as he hugged his daughter. He was happy for his daughter because even without her father's company, she didn't cry and throw a tantrum. He was also relieved because his daughter had her arms around his neck for the past 8 months. And he was completely bound by his daughter. Sometimes when she hugged his neck, Poplar Fruit couldn't breathe, but Poplar Fruit was more disappointed. Poplar Fruit was used to being relied on and needed by his daughter. But his daughter didn't need him anymore. She didn't rely on him anymore. Poplar Fruit felt that his life was suddenly incomplete. It was just like when Lu Yunran left his life all of a sudden. A piece of his heart was missing. After bidding farewell to Fong Beibei, Poplar Fruit walked out of the school gate. He waited for Song Jiwen, who came to pick him up, to go home together. Kiki woke up in the car. She opened her eyes in a daze and felt her father's familiar heartbeat. Seeing her father's familiar face, a smile bloomed on Kiki's face again. Poplar Fruit only realized it when Kiki squeezed against his chest. He looked down and saw Kiki's little face rubbing against her father's thin clothes. She blinked her big eyes and looked at her father. Poplar Fruit suddenly felt relieved. What was there to be upset about? No matter who Kiki played with and how well she played, the person she loved the most would always be her father, right? The last subject of the postgraduate entrance examination was politics. Compared to the previous 3 subjects, which were effortless, this subject was a little crazy. Even though Yang Guo had read a lot of reference books, there were still some questions on this test paper that he had never heard of before. As long as Poplar Fruit had read the questions before, Poplar Fruit could easily choose the correct answer. However, reference books weren't omnipotent. The person who came up with the questions used knowledge that didn't appear in the reference books. What could he do if he didn't know how to do it? Poplar Fruit smiled. He chose C for all the multiple choice questions that he didn't know how to do. Was there a need to repeatedly look at questions that he didn't understand at all? Poplar Fruit had such a cool attitude when answering questions when he was in school. There were also 2 subjective questions that Poplar Fruit didn't know how to answer. He didn't rack his brains to come up with some random answers, so he just left them blank. As for the questions that he didn't know how to answer, even if he got all of them wrong, he would only get around 20 marks, so he didn't care. Poplar Fruit spent a little more time on the politics test because he had to write more. However, he still handed in his test paper 1.5 hours early. He was still the anomaly in the examination hall that attracted a lot of attention. This time, Poplar Fruit still kept his promise and called Fong Beibei after 5 o'clock. He didn't tell Fong Beibei that he handed in his test paper early. If he did, he would still have to explain. It was too boring. Poplar Fruit promised to treat Fong Beibei and her roommates to dinner after the exam. When he called, Poplar Fruit also asked Fong Beibei to call her roommates down. "Where are you guys going to eat?" Poplar Fruit asked with a smile. "Senior, you can decide." This time, Liu Ruhua was a lot more reserved than yesterday. She didn't ask Poplar Fruit to give her money. "Why don't we go to Little North Gate to eat?" Fong Beibei suggested. Little North Gate was the most popular place for students to eat and drink. When Poplar Fruit was in school, he often went there to eat barbecue and drink beer with Songjiwen and a few of his buddies. However, the quality of the food there was too low. Although Poplar Fruit understood that Fong Beibei was thinking about his wallet, he still wanted to find a better place. They were all students. If they went to such a high-end place, they probably wouldn't enjoy it. Poplar Fruit thought for a while and said, "Why don't we go to Zujinji restaurant?" Fong Beibei and the others didn't know where Poplar Fruit was talking about. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "Just follow me." After they left the school gate, Poplar Fruit led them to another road across the street. It took them about 10 minutes to reach the place. This was actually a food stall, but it was more high-end than a food stall. The cost was high, and almost no students came here. When they were students, Poplar Fruit and Songjiwen came here a few times. They were invited by their godfather. After eating, Poplar Fruit realized that such a deserted place hid a good place for foodies. No one greeted them. They found a seat and sat down. After a while, the only waiter in the restaurant brought over a teapot, a plastic bowl, and a menu. After putting down the things, he turned around and went to the back to serve the dishes. "Don't mind it." Poplar Fruit pointed at the pen and paper and smiled. "You have to write down what you want to order. It's like this here." When Liu Ruhua and the others looked at the menu, Poplar Fruit introduced, "This restaurant is more famous for pig stomach chicken. This is a must order. The tofu is also very good. You can order what you want to eat." The girls thought about it and didn't want to eat pork with preserved vegetables. In the end, they ordered steamed scallops with garlic and vermicelli, fried pork with abalone mushrooms, double-cooked pork, and a plate of lettuce. Poplar Fruit handed the menu to Fong Beibei and said, "Beibei, you haven't ordered yet." Fong Beibei had just looked at the menu. The price of every dish on it made her click her tongue. She smiled and said, "No, it's already 6 dishes. I can't eat anymore." Poplar Fruit knew what she meant, but he still ordered crispy fried fresh milk. He still wanted dessert. While waiting for the dishes to be served, Poplar Fruit chatted with them. Today, Fong Beibei's roommates didn't make fun of Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei. However, the atmosphere wasn't very boring. Under the influence of the lively Liu Ruhua, several girls began to take turns to interrogate Poplar Fruit. "Senior, you haven't told us where you're from," Lin Xingshan asked boldly. "Why don't you guess?" Yang Gua smiled. Fong Beibei, who was sitting on his right, was playing with Kiki. When she heard Poplar Fruit's words, she raised her head and looked at Poplar Fruit. Liu Ruhua said first, "I guess you're also from the northeast. But the accent doesn't sound like it." Liu Lei retorted, "It sounds like the accent is from Guangdong province. How can there be such a tall boy in Guangdong province?" Liu Ruhua said disdainfully, "Senior, you're almost 1.9 meters tall." Poplar Fruit laughed and said, "No, I'm more than 1.8 meters tall." He was about 1.8 meters tall, so it wasn't wrong to say that he was 1.8 meters tall. "That's right, you're definitely from the northeast." Liu Ruhua said happily. Have you ever heard of a northeastern person speaking Mandarin like that? Liu Lei said, unwilling to give up. Poplar Fruit suddenly had a playful heart. He suddenly changed to the Beijing accent that he learned from Zheng Yujie and said, look at what you're saying. Does it mean that I'm from wherever I speak? Liu Ruhua and the others were stunned when they heard this. With a smile, Poplar Fruit began to imitate Uncle Benshan. He spoke Mandarin very quickly, and Liu Ruhua didn't react at all. She didn't understand the first half. But Liu Ruhua understood the second half, and it was a very intimate local accent. She said excitedly, I told you that Senior is from the northeast. Look at how fluent he is in Mandarin. Wu Yani covered her forehead and didn't say anything. Fong Beibei laughed and said, Ahua, don't you understand? Uncle is just messing around with you. Seeing that Liu Ruhua still didn't understand, Poplar Fruit changed to Hong Kong Mandarin again. He used all kinds of strange accents, and even pronounced this as Jer is, which made the girls laugh. This time, Liu Ruhua finally understood. She said in annoyance and amusement, can't we chat properly? Can't we still be friends? In the end, she pulled Liu Lei's arm and said, Lei, in the future, when you find a boyfriend, don't find a guy who speaks Mandarin like Senior. He's too cunning. Whenever you check on him, he can play several roles to deceive you. Poplar Fruit raised his hands and said, don't be like that, I was wrong. I didn't do it on purpose. We're not vegetarians, so don't bite us with the same brush, okay? That's not right. With the Taiwanese accent, Poplar Fruit couldn't stop playing. Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. Chapter 155. The girls continued to question him. However, Poplar Fruit had experience in a foreign trade company, so this kind of small situation was not difficult for him. He played Tai Chi and pushed them away while asking about their background. In the end, before they could ask about Poplar Fruit had already found out about their dep. Fong Beibei's roommates, Liu Ruhua and Wu Yani, were from other provinces. Liu Ruhua was from the northeast. No wonder she was so tall. Wu Yani was from Shanghai. She was a little aloof and didn't talk much. However, Poplar Fruit felt that her coldness was different from Duan Shueqing. Duan Shueqing was cold and ignored all disturbances. However, Wu Yani's coldness was faked. She was a little like a proud swan, disdaining to talk to people she looked down on. Of course, she didn't show it, but Poplar Fruit was still keenly aware of it. Yang Guo only smiled at this girl and didn't pay her any mind. Lin Xingshan and Liu Lei were both from Guangdong province. One was introverted, while the other wasn't. However, they could still chat a lot with people they were familiar with. Fong Beibei didn't join in. She listened quietly at the side and occasionally said a few words when she was involved. Poplar Fruit didn't see anything from her face, but she seemed a little unhappy today. Fong Beibei obviously didn't tell them about Poplar Fruit's work. Just when they wanted to ask about Poplar Fruit's work and income, Poplar Fruit said with a smile, the dishes are served. Let's eat. The girls present didn't come from provinces that liked spicy food, so this table of hacker dishes was more to their taste. Poplar Fruit was a person who was very particular about food. How could the food he recommended be bad? Soon, the girls started eating without caring about their image. The word praise wasn't enough to describe the deliciousness of the dishes on the table. The girls were so busy eating that they didn't even have time to talk. Towards the end of the meal, Liu Ruhua leaned back on the chair and rubbed her stomach as she lamented, Today, I went over the limit again. I've gone on a diet for nothing this week. After paying the bill, the girls went to the bathroom, leaving only Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei sitting there. Fong Beibei turned the teacup silently. Poplar Fruit hesitated and said, Beibei, if you have time, can you come to my house more often? Or, ask you out to play. Fong Beibei raised his head and looked at Poplar Fruit. He panicked and added, It's mainly because Kiki likes you a lot. Looking at Poplar Fruit's eyes that were as deep as the starry sky, Fong Beibei nodded softly. When they got home, Kiki fell asleep quickly. Poplar Fruit poured himself a cup of hot water and sat on the chair on the balcony, enjoying the cold wind and looking at the waning lights. He sat there for a long time and didn't drink the water even when it was cold. Chapter 156. When they were in school, society was like a roller coaster in an amusement park. It was full of excitement and they yearned to step into society as soon as possible to explore and adventure. But once they entered society, they would slowly start to miss the time in school. Back then, it was just you and me. It was an ivory tower world with only books and love. Time was gone and no matter how much they missed it, they couldn't return to the past unless they became the main character of a rebirth novel. However, after getting used to the deceit of society, people would think of their old classmates, those who used to talk about life without any worries or scruples. And so, the party began. On Wednesday, Poplar Fruit received a call from his class monitor, Luo Feiyue, asking him to come out on Saturday night for a gathering. This gathering was mainly for his classmates who were still working in Yangcheng. Of course, because there weren't many people in his class, he also invited his juniors who had just graduated this year. When his classmates in Yangcheng had just graduated, they would gather once every month or two. Later on, it gradually became less frequent. This time, it was almost a year ago and Poplar Fruit cherished it very much. So, he readily agreed. The location of the gathering was a hot pot restaurant. It was less than 2 streets away from where Poplar Fruit used to live. The reason why the class monitor didn't choose a hotel was because he considered everyone's spending power. They were all people who had worked for less than 2 years and the price of the hot pot restaurant was just right. At most, each person would pay 100 yuan. The class monitor planned to pay for the rest. On Saturday, because Song Chunfang needed a car, Poplar Fruit and Song Jiwen stopped a taxi. They picked up Du and Xueqing and went to the gathering together. When they arrived at the destination, the class monitor, Luo Feiyue, and Du and Xueqing's class monitor, Zhu Guanglan, were already waiting at the door. Poplar Fruit looked through the taxi window and saw Luo Feiyue and Zhu Guanglan standing together. Their bodies were pressed together and they looked like a newlywed couple welcoming their wedding guests. I heard that old Luo hooked up with Guanglan. Song Jiwen turned his head from the front seat and smiled slyly. So that's how it is. No wonder the gathering required 2 grades to be together. Poplar Fruit was suddenly enlightened. Poplar Fruit and the others got out of the car. Luo Feiyue and Zhu Guanglan immediately greeted them. Jiwen. Luo Feiyue gave Song Jiwen a big hug. Zhu Guanglan also affectionately held Du and Xueqing's hand. The 2 girls chatted softly on the side. Although they hadn't seen each other for a year, Luo Feiyue didn't recognize Poplar Fruit at first glance. After he carefully looked at him, he said in disbelief, "Poplar Fruit? It's you, kid. How did you become so tall and handsome?" She quietly nestled in her father's arms, only occasionally smiling at everyone. This was not the first time. Poplar Fruit certainly understood the reason. Kiki was about to grow another tooth. Her gums were itchy and uncomfortable, but she was still smiling. That was already a lot of face. Everyone gradually took their seats. Poplar Fruit sat next to Song Jiwen, and Du and Xueqing quietly sat on the left side of Poplar Fruit. She didn't sit with her peers in the same grade. Speaking of which, Du and Xueqing's roommate and best friend, Ma Yonghong, actually worked in Yangcheng. However, unfortunately, she was temporarily sent on a business trip by the company the day before yesterday. This time, she couldn't make it. That's not fair. All of you are handsome and beautiful. Hurry up and give one to me, a classmate joked. That's right. A group of people blindly jeered. You all came. At this time, the door of the private room was pushed open. A man in a slim suit walked in. Liang Zhenglin, you brat, you came late. Du and Xueqing and the others in the same grade laughed. Poplar Fruit knew this man called Liang Zhenglin. He heard that his family owned a company. He was a rich second generation. He was generous and often treated his classmates to meals. Therefore, he was quite popular. Since the beginning of the first year, he chased after Du and Xueqing. Poplar fruit once helped Duan Shueching to be a shield, but the effect wasn't very good. This guy was the type to pester. However, although he was pestering, he wasn't a loyal person. He also hooked up with other women. On the surface, he said that he was single. In fact, he didn't know how many girlfriends he had changed. Compared to him, Song Jiwen was many times better. Song Jiwen was an open and above-board lover, or former lover. This guy was a wolf in sheep's clothing. He was hypocritical. Seeing him appear, Poplar Fruit and Duan Shueching both frowned. The moment he entered, Liang Zhanglin also saw Duan Shueching. This was the woman who had caused him to suffer countless losses. Even after so many years, she was still as cold and aloof as before, keeping everyone at a distance. However, this was also why Duan Shueching attracted him. Fat meat that couldn't be eaten was always the most delicious. Every time Liang Zhanglin saw Duan Shueching, he had the urge to push her down, tear her skirt, and ravage her over and over again. However, he didn't show it. Shueching, you're here too? Liang Zhanglin walked over and pretended to be calm. Actually, he had already found out that Duan Shueching would be coming over this time. Hence, he specially made some preparations. Poplar Fruit could smell the cologne on Liang Zhanglin's body from afar. This made him feel a little disgusted. A man who looked a little feminine was wearing cologne. Long time no see. I didn't bring you any gift. Liang Zhanglin said hypocritically. How about this? His hand naturally reached under the table. When he picked it up, a small bouquet of delicate red roses appeared in his hand. Wow! Not sure if he had found someone to cooperate with him secretly, his performance attracted a few cheers. Flower beauties are even more beautiful. Shueching, this bouquet of flowers is for you, Liang Zhanglin said. His face revealed a charming smile. I don't want it. Duan Shueching coldly said these 3 words. The originally warm atmosphere quickly turned cold. Zhanglin has good intentions. Shueching, just accept it. Liang Zhanglin glanced at her. A few girls understood and agreed. You want it, you accept it. Duan Shueching looked at them expressionlessly. Her eyes emitted a cold light. All right. Shueching doesn't like flowers. I forgot. Liang Zhanglin was used to being rejected. He didn't mind and said, it's my fault. Next time, I'll bring you something better. Come. These flowers are also for the beautiful ladies. While he was giving the flowers to the girls, Poplar Fruit gave Song Jiwen a look. Song Jiwen understood. He stood up and quietly sat on the other side of Duan Shueching. I say, today none of you are allowed to toast Shueching. Shueching can't drink. If you want to toast, come to me. Liang Zhanglin laughed loudly. He turned around and wanted to sit down on the empty seat beside Duan Shueching. But when he turned around, he saw Song Jiwen sitting there and smiling at him. You. Liang Zhanglin wanted to question Song Jiwen. Wasn't he sitting on the other side? Why did he come over? But he held it in. They were both hedonistic sons. Song Jiwen wasn't afraid of him. He didn't dare to provoke Song Jiwen. After all, Song Jiwen had a powerful father. You. Seeing Poplar Fruit's face on the other side, Liang Zhanglin bitterly shut his mouth. He didn't plan to try to persuade Poplar Fruit to give up his seat. These few years, he knew that Poplar Fruit often protected Duan Shueching. Rather than being disgraced, he might as well be smart and not ask. Everyone, use your votes to smash the poor. Chapter 157. Liang Zhanglin angrily sat opposite to Duan Shueching and Poplar Fruit. However, he was used to being beaten, so he soon started chatting with the girls next to him. There weren't many male students who majored in language and literature, so there were only 5 people from the 2 grades present. The girls were chattering in full swing. The entire room was so noisy that it was as if there were thousands of ducks. Poplar Fruit's attention was mainly on Kiki. He would chat with the students next to him from time to time, but he didn't talk much. Duan Shueching was an ice cube, so she naturally wouldn't take the initiative to chat with others. She was still happy that Poplar Fruit asked Song Jiwen to sit over and help her drive away Liang Zhenglin. From time to time, she would look at Poplar Fruit with an imperceptible smile on her face. Everyone is here. Luo Feiyue walked in with the last student and said with a hearty smile, I'll ask the waiter to serve the dishes. Everyone, get ready to eat. Eat what? Everyone is here to see an old classmate. Chatting is the main topic, okay? Fan Fang laughed. When they were in college, she and Luo Feiyue were the most active in the class. Now, she was also mercilessly arguing with Luo Feiyue. Fan, don't eat if you have the guts. Luo Feiyue pretended to be angry and said, we'll eat for you to see if you can bear it or not. As he spoke, he laughed. Everyone also laughed. When Fan Fang was in college, she was famous for being a glutton. Hence, she got the nickname Fan. No one believed that she could bear it. Fan Fang rolled her eyes and hugged Zhu Guanglan, who was beside her, and said, Lan, your man is bullying me. You have to help me. When we go back tonight, don't let him go to bed, okay? Zhu Guanglan's skin was shallow. She couldn't bear the teasing and her face immediately turned red. Luo Feiyue laughed, Fan, don't bully my Lan. Under everyone's jesting, the side dishes of the hot pot were served one after another. Luo Feiyue called out as he poured plates of beef and enoki mushrooms into the hot pot. In the middle of winter, eating steaming chunks of meat in the hot pot and drinking iced soda and beer was indeed a very delightful thing. However, Poplar Fruit quickly attracted everyone's dissatisfaction. How could a man like him drink Sprite? Liang Zhenglin, in particular, shouted the loudest. Change it to beer. If you're not sincere enough, you'll be fined 10 glasses. Poplar Fruit smiled and waved to everyone. You really can't drink. I have a child with me today. He took Kiki's little hand and waved to everyone. Kiki's cute little face softened the hearts of the girls present. They all said, Poplar Fruit, senior brother, forget it. It's okay if he doesn't drink it. Luo Feiyue put down his cup and patted the table lightly to attract everyone's attention. He said with emotion, when we graduated 2 years ago, I said that we were all going to be 30 years old. Maybe in a few years, someone would bring a child to the reunion. I didn't expect that day to come so early. He looked at Poplar Fruit and scolded with a smile. Even more unexpected was that the first person to bring a child would be you, Poplar Fruit. And the child is already so big. It can't be that she was just born, right? Yeah, we all thought it would be Xia Minute. Fan Fang laughed. Yeah, senior sister Xia Minute got her marriage certificate after graduation. Zhu Guanglan said. So, Poplar Fruit, you can drink as punishment, but you have to share your story with us, right? Luo Feiyue laughed. Also, you have to reflect on yourself. Why didn't you invite us to your wedding banquet after secretly getting married? Poplar Fruit smiled and touched Kiki's little head. He said softly, actually, there's no special story. Kiki was born in May of 2011, so she wasn't even 1 year old yet. The reason why I didn't invite you to my wedding banquet was that I really wasn't married. Kiki's mother passed away when she gave birth to her. Hearing this, everyone was stunned. Zhu Guanglan pulled Luo Feiyue's sleeve and complained, Why are you asking? You've touched on my sore spot. It's really nothing. Poplar Fruit laughed. It's been a long time. Kiki and I are actually living happily together. Don't worry about me, everyone. Come on, let's eat. Okay. I'm stupid. I'll punish myself by drinking 3 cups. Luo Feiyue drank 3 cups of beer in one go. After drinking, his face didn't turn red and his body didn't sway. It seemed that he had drunk a lot of beer in the past 2 years. As they ate, the atmosphere became lively again. Brother Luo, why did you choose this place today? Let's go to Da Fugue. There's food and entertainment there. After eating, we can go to the karaoke. I have a membership card. Liang Zhenglin was eating there. He was sweating so much that his hair gel was melting. He couldn't help complaining. Luo Feiyue wasn't annoyed. He smiled and said, Child Liang, if you want to treat us, we'll go there right away. Then, Liang Zhenglin was interrupted by Fan Fang before he could finish his sentence. You guys can go there if you want. We're not going to that place, Fan Fang said with a look of disdain. Rich Boss was actually a hotel-level nightclub. There were all kinds of services in the open and in the dark. It was a money-squandering establishment for corrupt officials. Fan Fang had also heard of it. Ha ha. Luo Feiyue put his arm around Zhu Guanglan's shoulder and laughed at Liang Zhenglin. Then there's no other way. Child Liang, you'd better stay here today. If you go there, my backyard will be on fire. Without a chance to show off his financial resources, Liang Zhenglin rolled his eyes and pretended not to care as he fiddled with the BMW car key on the table. He said, by the way, I haven't seen you guys for a long time. I don't know where the senior brothers and sisters here work. Why don't you tell me about it yourselves? If we have business dealings, we can take care of each other. No one refuted him. Luo Feiyue smiled and said, okay, I'll say it first. I'm now working in Futian. I sell houses. If you want to buy a house, you can find me. I promise to give you the best price. Futian was one of the top real estate tycoons in Guangdong province. Luo Feiyue's words were very simple, but everyone understood that he was still keeping a low profile. After a few people, it was Song Jiwen's turn. Song Jiwen smiled and said, I'm just a small civil servant. I don't have much ability. I still need to rely on you to support me in the future. Luo Feiyue knew his background. He laughed and said jokingly, Leader Song, of course, we have to carry your shoes in the future. Duan Xueqing only said 3 words, civil servant. Poplar Fruit said with a smile, I'm working again. Now I'm translating things for others at home. Hey, didn't you work in a foreign trade company before? Luo Feiyue asked. I quit, Poplar Fruit said. That's good. Liang Zhenglin said, my dad's company often has some documents that need to be translated. It doesn't matter who he does it for. Brother Yang Guo, why don't I talk to my dad and ask him to take care of your business? Haha. He laughed unscrupulously and didn't hide his sense of superiority in his laughter. And it's a big production. Poplar Fruit blushed with shame and said, correction, it's not a book, I'm just a translator, and I'm not the only one who flipped it. Poplar Fruit, you've developed an occupational disease as a translator. You don't say. For us who study languages, translating a book is no different from publishing a book. Fan Fang laughed. It's really Poplar Fruit. A classmate who was an Apple fan remembered and said in surprise, I bought that book too. I glanced at it and didn't think much of it. I thought it was someone with the same name. Oh, I remember too. A classmate echoed. The young translator who earns 100,000 a month in the newspaper is Poplar Fruit. What newspaper? What newspaper? A classmate couldn't wait to ask. Nandu. You haven't read it? The classmate replied. I haven't. I haven't even booked a job. 100,000 a month, that's too awesome. This classmate saw Poplar Fruit's income and clicked his tongue. The room was full of exclamations. Everyone looked at Poplar Fruit in a different light. Many of the students in the room no longer had anything to do with English, but after all, they used to love English. They were all English majors, and most of them had a desire to be a translator. They had fantasized about being able to stand in a large conference and publish a translated book. Even if it didn't happen, the passion was still hidden in their bones. Poplar Fruit's achievement reminded them of their dreams, and they were envious. Of course, there was no need to mention the income. Nowadays, how many people could get a salary of 100,000 a year? Amazing. Luo Feiyue stood up and raised his glass to toast Poplar Fruit. He smiled and said, You did something that we wanted to do but didn't dare to do. Old Luo is here to toast you. Let's talk about the grades in college. Luo Feiyue, who had just been toasted, was a little tipsy. He swept his fingers around and smiled. Most of the people here are better than Poplar Fruit, including me. I was at the bottom of the class at that time, but now, Who dares to say that their English is better than poplar fruit's? Little Ching can. A girl in the same grade as Duan Shueching deliberately argued. Little Ching is the first in our grade. Even the teacher said that her English is good. Duan Shueching received a national scholarship for 3 years in college. If she didn't give it up, she would definitely be recommended for postgraduate studies, or even to a better school. I can't. Duan Shueching waved her hand and said, Brother Yang is amazing now. See. Luo Feiyue laughed and said, so, poplar fruit is the one who has changed the most. The counterattack of a bad student, and he has become a tall, rich, and handsome guy in an instant. Don't you think I'm right? Everyone was stunned and laughed. Poplar fruit wasn't annoyed by Luo Feiyue's ridicule. He also laughed with everyone. Liang Zhenglin didn't laugh. He sat in a forgotten place and looked at poplar fruit with jealousy. Today, he finally brought up the topic of his own company. In the end, the limelight was stolen by poplar fruit. At this time, he could clearly see that Duan Shueching looked at poplar fruit in a different way. The jealousy in his heart was burning fiercely. He wondered if he should find a few punks to teach poplar fruit a lesson. When they were in school, Liang Zhenglin's fights were just small fights. Although he was rejected by Duan Shueching many times because of poplar fruit's relationship, he thought, he still didn't dare to find someone to beat up his senior. The influence would be too bad. But now, after Liang Zhenglin opened his own company, it was inevitable that he would have to deal with all kinds of people. The more he saw, the harder and darker his heart became. Now that poplar fruit was ruining his plans, new and old hatred came together. He couldn't suppress the idea of finding someone to teach poplar fruit a lesson. While everyone was talking and laughing, Liang Zhenglin bowed and walked out. After a while, he came back. The gloomy expression on his face was gone. Everyone could see that he was proud of himself. The classmate sitting next to him laughed and said, Big Boss Liang, did you just meet a beauty in the bathroom? You look proud of yourself. No way. Haha, let's drink, come on. Liang Zhenglin denied. Looks like it. Quickly punish yourself by drinking 3 cups. The others didn't give up. After a long time, the table was a mess of cups and plates. Everyone was almost done eating and drinking. They all sat on the chairs and chatted as far as the eye could see. In this noisy and hot environment, Kiki fell asleep. Poplar Fruit asked Duan Shueching to help hold her while he got up to go to the bathroom. After shaking off the water, Poplar Fruit saw Luo Feiyue smoking by the corridor window. Luo Feiyue was the focus of everyone's attention today. His eyes were a little blurred. Seeing Poplar Fruit, Luo Feiyue offered him a cigarette. Poplar Fruit shook his hand and refused. Luo Feiyue laughed and said, People with children are different. You don't smoke or drink. Good man. I didn't smoke before. Poplar Fruit laughed. Luo Feiyue thought hard and said, That's true. Sorry, I drank too much tonight. You didn't smoke before, right? Poplar Fruit said. Yeah, I didn't smoke before, and I didn't drink much either. Luo Feiyue smiled bitterly and said, But I had no choice. In this line of work, I can't avoid touching everything. Seeing Poplar Fruit's strange look, Luo Feiyue punched him and laughed, It's not what you think. I still adhere to my principles. Even cigarettes, one after another, and liquor after liquor, from Hongpagoda Mountain to Zhonghua. It's all forced by life. Poplar Fruit deeply agreed. When he was in the foreign trade company, he also had to drink with customers. Sometimes, halfway through drinking, he would secretly run to the bathroom and vomit into the toilet. When did you and Zhu Guanglan start? Poplar Fruit asked, no longer discussing the unsolvable proposition. Senior year. Luo Feiyue said with a little nostalgia. She's in her senior year. No, I'm in my senior year. Poplar Fruit said in surprise, No way, I haven't heard anything about it. Haha, we were secretly talking about it back then. Luo Feiyue said proudly, We fought in the Tunnel War for 2 years, and only when she graduated did people know about it. Damn. Did anyone catch you two in a puppy love? Why were you secretly talking about it? Poplar Fruit was speechless. You don't know how good Guanglan's family is. How could a poor kid like me dare to tell others about it? Otherwise, it would be a joke if we broke up. Luo Feiyue smiled bitterly and said, so, after I graduated, I have been working hard to get closer to her and give her a happy life. Only in this way, I dared to tell others about our relationship. It's already very good now. Your career is successful, and you have money and a car. Poplar Fruit pointed at the car key on his waist. The car was given to me by the company. Luo Feiyue smiled and said, it's mainly because I have a house. Employees in our line of work have a discount when buying a house, and Guanglan's parents happened to support us, so we gathered enough money for the down payment. After the spring festival, we handed over the house. You've already met her parents. It seems like you're going to get married soon. Poplar Fruit smiled. Not yet. Guanglan and I have already agreed to get married in 2 years. Luo Feiyue smiled. His smile was filled with happiness that made others envious. Chapter 159. After Luo Feiyue finished smoking, Poplar Fruit followed him to the private room. Before the door was opened, there was a noise coming from the hall. Where did this wild child come from? A shrill female voice sounded. Don't you look where you are going? What did your parents teach you? Sorry. This child is not sensible. I am really sorry. Brothers, please forgive me. What's the use of saying sorry? Do you know how much this dress costs? If it gets dirty, can you afford to pay for it? Pa. 2 crisp sounds were heard. If you don't know how to discipline your child, I will help you. Poplar Fruit frowned. He was not annoyed by the noise, but because he heard the voice of his former neighbor, Liu Guilin, and Lil Dong's crying. You go in first. I will go and take a look. Poplar Fruit said to Luo Feiyue. Poplar Fruit turned around and walked away. Luo Feiyue thought for a moment, released his hand that was holding the door handle and followed him. How can you hit people? Poplar Fruit walked to the corridor and saw Liu Guilin pointing at them with an agitated look. There were not many guests in the hall. There were only a few scattered tables. The table where Liu Guilin was in trouble was surrounded by 4 or 5 sturdy men and a few coquettish women. Because of the hot pot, the temperature in the restaurant was not low. Moreover, they were eating the steaming hot food. Those men took off their jackets and put them behind the chairs, leaving only a black vest, revealing their strong muscles. They looked like fitness trainers in a gym. Liu Guilin looked agitated. Fang Wenjing pulled the crying Lil Dong to the side and squatted down to look at Lil Dong. Poplar Fruit could see that Lil Dong was covering his face with his hands, revealing a red palm print. Poplar Fruit only took a glance and guessed the cause of this matter. When Liu Guilin and his family were about to leave, Xiao Dong ran out and accidentally bumped into the leg of a woman who was standing up. Then, she shook the wine glass in her hand and spilled some wine on her clothes. Actually, it was not much. Looking at her chest, the wet mark was not even as big as a palm. On the contrary, the collar of her clothes was too low, and a little of it flowed into her towering breasts. She was holding a tissue and wiping it while cursing. The eyes of the men at their table were shining. They wished they could become the tissue in her hand and squeeze in. If you don't know how to teach your child, we will help you teach him a lesson. Are you dissatisfied? That unruly big-breasted woman laughed loudly. This old lady specializes in dealing with all kinds of dissatisfaction. Her joke, which had been used too many times, still received a warm response from her companions. Poplar Fruit looked at them laughing unscrupulously and Liu Guilin, who was angry but didn't know how to deal with them. He walked towards them. Brother Liu. Poplar Fruit patted Liu Guilin's shoulder and said, Poplar Fruit. Why are you here? Liu Guilin looked at Poplar Fruit in surprise. Poplar Fruit did not answer. This was not the time for small talk. He walked between Liu Guilin and the table and asked coldly, What do you want? Yo. You want to bully us with more people, right? A man with a crew cut lazily stood up, twisted his head, and his thick chest muscles trembled as he said disdainfully, Let's see who has more people. Another man at the table shouted, which caused another burst of laughter. What do you want? Kneel down for this old lady, kowtow and admit your mistake, and this debt will be written off, the big-breasted woman said with her hands on her waist. You guys are going too far. Liu Guilin clenched his fists and said with hatred. Don't go too far. Isn't it just a child who accidentally touched it? Is there a need to go through so much trouble? Moreover, you even hit the child? Poplar Fruit asked angrily. Who do you think you are? Do we need you to tell us how to do things? The crew-cut man pointed at Poplar Fruit and cursed. He walked over. Poplar Fruit was a little taller than him, but in terms of size, Poplar Fruit was far inferior. The crew-cut man came over aggressively, but Poplar Fruit was unmoved. He looked at the words Xingyi on the men's backs and asked with his brows knitted, Do you learn martial arts to bully the weak and beat children? Which master taught you this? Do you have any moral upbringing? Poplar Fruit's words seemed to have stepped on their sore spot. The crew-cut man jumped up and cursed as he raised his hand to slap Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit stepped to the side and grabbed the crew-cut man's right hand. He coldly said, You want to hit me because of a disagreement? In the face of fierce and ruthless robbers, Yang Guo could beat them all by himself. The people in front of him were drunk until their faces were red and their hands and feet were numb. How could he care about them? However, he still wanted to reason with them. Civilized people shouldn't fight and kill. The crew-cut man's right hand was grabbed by Poplar Fruit. He tried to pull his hand out, but he couldn't. He felt embarrassed and shouted angrily, Fuck you. At this moment, he clenched his left hand into a fist and punched Poplar Fruit's ribs. This punch was very forceful and sinister. If it hit, it wouldn't be as simple as a loss of breath. It would definitely break a few ribs. A cold light flashed in Yang Guo's eyes. His right hand shot out like lightning and grabbed the left fist of the crew-cut guy. Then he twisted his right fist and made him lose his balance. Then he kicked the crew-cut guy and made him fall to the ground. The crew-cut man fell to the ground, and the chair behind him hit the table with a loud noise. Poplar Fruit said coldly, This is your retribution for hitting a kid. Luo Feiyue, who was standing behind Yang Guo, was also stupefied. He had been following behind Yang Guo in a daze. He hadn't even seen clearly what had happened when a fight broke out. Then, Yang Guo didn't suffer a loss while facing this brawny man. Instead, she beat him down. This scene was simply too unbelievable. Was this still the gentle Poplar Fruit he used to know? In fact, Poplar Fruit had fought before. But when he went to university, he stayed in an environment where there were fewer boys and more girls. Naturally, he wasn't so impulsive. So many people thought that a liberal arts guy like Poplar Fruit was gentle and elegant. The man with the crew cut was knocked down. His companions all stood up and pushed their chairs with a clatter. The crew cut man also stood up. His face was gloomy, and his clothes were stained with soup. The big-breasted woman was very sensible. Seeing that the situation was not good, she quickly hid behind them. Don't fight. Let's talk nicely. The boss of the hot pot restaurant hurried over and said with a bitter face. Fuck you. The crew cut man was now very angry. He pushed the boss fiercely and staggered. Oh, you still want to bully me with your numbers? Poplar Fruit sneered and said back to them. A man who was about the same height as Poplar Fruit, but had bigger muscles than the crew cut man, pushed the crew cut man away and said, You want to bully me with your numbers? You're not qualified. Let me fight you. Chapter 160. Brother Stone. The crew-cut youth said unwillingly. That's enough. The brawny man called Brother Stone turned around and scolded the crew-cut youth. Don't embarrass yourself if you're not skilled enough. The crew-cut youth angrily retreated to the back. The woman he brought with him handed him a tissue to wipe his clothes. The boss cried miserably and begged, Heroes, can you please move outside and fight? Our small business can't afford to break anything. Why are you talking so much nonsense? The crew-cut youth cursed. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, Brother Stone, right? If you want to fight, let's go outside. Don't disturb other people's business. I don't deserve to be called Brother Stone. My name is Fu Lei. You're good at fighting, so I'll give you face today. Let's go outside and fight. Fu Lei readily agreed to Poplar Fruit's proposal. In fact, he also felt that this place was too narrow, and he couldn't stretch out his fighting skills. The men and women of the Xingyi Martial School put on their jackets and went outside. Poplar Fruit was about to follow them when Fang Wenjing anxiously pulled Poplar Fruit and whispered, "Poplar Fruit, don't go out." Poplar Fruit patted Fang Wenjing's shoulder and comforted her and Liu Guilin, saying, "Don't worry. Poplar Fruit, don't go out. They have a lot of people." Luo Feiyue was worried that Poplar Fruit would be at a disadvantage, so he also tried to persuade him. Poplar Fruit slightly smiled and shook his head at Luo Feiyue. He didn't say anything and turned around and walked out. Luo Feiyue looked at Poplar Fruit's back as he walked out of the door and into the cold wind. He frowned. He knew that if he went out with Poplar Fruit, he would also be beaten up. Therefore, he decisively ran to his private room. The atmosphere in the private room was very lively, and the students were chatting happily. At this moment, Fan Fang was sitting in Poplar Fruit's seat. She was holding Duan Xueqing's hand and saying something. Duan Xueqing's originally frosty face was stained with a layer of pink blush. Liang Zhanglin, who was sitting opposite her, was about to drool when he saw the shy ice beauty. "Boys, come with me." Luo Feiyue pushed open the door and shouted anxiously, "Poplar Fruit is fighting with someone outside." The air in the room stagnated. Song Jiwen slammed the table, picked up a wine bottle, and staggered to his feet. He roared, "What?" Zhu Guanglan ran over and pulled Luo Feiyue's arm as she worriedly asked, "What happened?" The students in the room all had different expressions. Some were worried, some were confused, and some were scared. Only Liang Zhanglin was secretly laughing. "Hee, Poplar Fruit, you ruined my business. You're courting death." Liang Zhanglin thought proudly. But when he looked at his watch, he also had some doubts. Why did Brother Dafei and the others come so early today? Didn't they say that they would arrive at 10 o'clock? It's not even 9:30 yet. Why did they come early? Luo Feiyue simply explained, "We just met a friend of Poplar Fruit's. Their child was bullied, and Poplar Fruit stood up for them. Now, they are fighting outside. There are 5 bullies on the other side. Let's go and help them." "What are you talking about? Let's go," Song Jiwen said impatiently. There weren't many people who responded. A boy was pretending to be drunk, and Liang Zhanglin was also dawdling. He wasn't as agile as Fan Fang and the other girls. Luo Feiyue walked in front with Song Jiwen, while Fan Fang pulled Duan Xueqing and asked her to call the police first. On the other side, Poplar Fruit walked out with them and looked at them with a faint smile on his face. The temperature outside had dropped to 6 or 7 degrees. It was extremely cold. Even the muscular men were shivering and trying to put on their jackets. The other 4 men stood at the back with the women. Fu Lei walked in front of Yang Guo and cracked his neck. His thick knuckles made cracking sounds. His eyes revealed a crazy light. He laughed and said, "Kid, we are from the Guo family's Xingyi martial arts school. Fists and feet have no eyes. Don't blame me for not warning you if you get hurt. It's not too late for you to regret now. Kowtow to my brother and apologize, and this matter will be over." Poplar Fruit smiled indifferently and said, "Why are you talking so much nonsense? If you want to fight, let's fight." Although his expression was calm, Poplar Fruit's eyes were a little excited. He didn't know why, but after showing off his skills at the bank, Poplar Fruit always had the urge to fight with someone again. Practicing martial arts was not as satisfying as fighting. Poplar Fruit turned sideways and put his left hand behind his back. His right palm faced up and slowly stretched out. This wasn't the beginning of Tai Chi. He saw it in a movie and thought it looked pretty cool, so he used it. Fu Lei didn't understand. In all the martial arts he knew, there wasn't a single one that looked weird. Usually, 2 hands were in front. Who would only put 1 hand behind their back? However, this posture looked very provocative. He was clearly letting him go first. He was looking down on others. Me. Fu Lei took advantage of the situation. Although he was a little annoyed, his martial arts were still methodical. When he took a step, his feet touched the ground first and his toes were firmly grasped. His lower body was as stable as a pine tree. His body was dignified and didn't sway. When he punched, his wrist was slightly bent and his 5 fingers were naturally separated. He didn't hold his palm tightly and left himself some leeway. Although he was tall and muscular, his punches were not slow. With a wave of his left hand, his right hand, which was as big as a casserole, punched towards Poplar Fruit's head. Chop fist. These 2 words flashed through Poplar Fruit's mind. During this period of time, Poplar Fruit had been studying Xingyi Quan. He was very familiar with this move. Poplar Fruit subconsciously wanted to turn around. The next step was to lead the attack. If the force of the attack missed, then he would use the force to hit someone. However, just as he turned around, Poplar Fruit's heart skipped a beat. He didn't want to use Tai Chi to hit Fu Lei. It was rare to meet someone who learned Xingyi Quan. Why not spar with him? Fu Lei didn't care that his fist was dodged by Poplar Fruit. He immediately changed his move. He bent his knees, raised his left arm, and used his right hand to form a cannon fist. His fist was like a cannonball as it fiercely smashed towards Poplar Fruit's abdomen. If this punch landed, Poplar Fruit would probably vomit out all the food he ate last night. Good. Poplar Fruit shouted in his heart. Fu Lei's fist came quickly, but Poplar Fruit's reaction was even faster. He dodged and took a step to the left. His left fist was aimed at Fu Lei's face. Fu Lei hurriedly leaned to the side and used his left arm to block the attack. He also raised his right arm to protect his head. He was ready to retreat and create some distance. However, how could Poplar Fruit let him retreat so easily? He quickly moved to the right, squatted down, and used his right fist to hit Fu Lei's left face. Fu Lei wanted to say, "Don't hit my face." However, he could only block Poplar Fruit's storm-like attack. He didn't have the time to think about resisting. What's worse is that although Yang Guo looks skinny, the strength of her fists is not small. Just one hit will make the arm go numb. He could only cross his right arm to the left to block Poplar Fruit's attack. However, these were all feints by Poplar Fruit. Fu Lei was forced to raise his arms to protect his face. His center was wide open, giving Poplar Fruit a chance to land the final blow. Poplar Fruit beautifully turned around. Using the inertia of turning, he threw a right punch and hit Fu Lei's abdomen directly. Poplar Fruit's combination of punches only took 2 to 3 seconds. It was so fast that no one could react. Fu Lei was already defeated. Fu Lei wanted to hit Poplar Fruit's abdomen but didn't. Now, he was hit in the stomach by Poplar Fruit. Not good. Fu Lei was shocked, but he did not feel the pain he had expected. It was as if the fist was pressing on his stomach. It did not sink in, and with a gentle push, his body involuntarily flew up and sat down. Poplar Fruit did save his strength at the last moment. He didn't want to fight to the death with his opponent. There was no need to paralyze half of his opponent's body. Therefore, the moment he threw the blast punch, he changed it to the soft force of Tai Chi. However, even so, Fu Lei didn't feel good. After all, he had just eaten a full meal. He felt his stomach churning. It took him a lot of effort to hold it in. He fell on the sidewalk in the middle of winter. His clothes were still there, but his right palm was burning with pain. Fu Lei didn't need to think to know that his skin was scraped. Fu Lei's companions quickly helped him up and glared at Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit wasn't afraid. He resumed his fighting stance and looked at them. "Motherfucker." The crew cut guy, who kept repeating his catchphrase, took the lead and rushed forward. Poplar Fruit smiled. He didn't need to show mercy to the crew cut guy. Before the crew cut guy could raise his fist, Poplar Fruit sent him to the ground with a chop. "Okay, stop fighting." Fu Lei, who finally recovered, pulled the rest of his companions and shouted, "Come back." He wasn't stupid. He knew that Yang Guo was being merciful to him. Against an expert who could take him down in a few seconds, his teammates who were only good at scaring people wouldn't even be able to fill the gaps between her teeth. Fu Lei asked his companions to pull the crew-cut guy up. He looked at Poplar Fruit and said to his companions, "Let's go." "Wait a minute." Poplar Fruit coldly pointed at the big-breasted woman and said, "Your friend still owes us an apology." Fang Wenjing walked behind Poplar Fruit with some fear. She pulled his sleeve and said, "No need." "Why not?" Poplar Fruit said in a loud voice, "People who practice martial arts don't fight for justice. Instead, they bully the weak, women, and children." "What did your master teach you?" The crew-cut guy, who was supported by his companions, looked at Poplar Fruit with eyes that were about to spit out fire. Fu Lei also stared at Poplar Fruit. He was a little angry, but the situation was better than him. He turned his head and looked at the big-breasted woman and said word by word, apologize." The big-breasted woman was so scared that her face was even paler than her foundation. Seeing the crew-cut guy and Fu Lei being easily defeated, she also learned her lesson and didn't dare to delay. She walked out from the crowd and lowered her head to her unfathomable cleavage. She softly said, "I'm sorry." After the apology was made, Poplar Fruit didn't hold on to it anymore. His eyes relaxed a lot. Fu Lei stared at Poplar Fruit and said in a deep voice, "It's a small world, we'll meet again. Let's go." After that, a large group of people turned around and walked away. Poplar Fruit fearlessly looked at their backs. "We'll meet again. I'll beat you up every time you come here." Chapter 161. Big Brother. After walking for a while, the crew-cut guy finally couldn't take it anymore. He pushed his friend away and said to Fu Lei, "Are we just going to let them go like this?" Fu Lei glared at him and said, "What else? The 5 of us together can definitely beat him up." The crew-cut guy said excitedly, "If we go, we'll be the ones to be beaten up." "Brainless guy." Fu Lei scolded him and explained, "It only took him a few seconds to beat me up, but it took less than a second to beat you up. Are the 5 of us enough for him to play with? Don't you think it's embarrassing enough?" The crew-cut guy said unwillingly, "Why don't we go back and tell Senior or the curator? The curator is so powerful, he can definitely." Before he could finish, someone behind him gave him a slap and scolded, "Are you stupid or stupid?" Fu Lei didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at his brainless friend and scolded, "What are you going to tell the curator? Say that we bullied kids and got bullied by adults. Do you think the curator will punish him or you? Then what should we do?" The crew-cut guy shouted, "Are we just going to swallow this?" Fu Lei, of course, didn't want to. He shook his head and said, "We're not as good as them. We can only hide for now and think of a solution when we go back." After Fu Lei and his friends walked out of sight, Song Jiwen and the others came up to them, panting. "Where are they? They bullied my brother." Song Jiwen opened his coat and rolled up his sleeves, waving a bottle of wine as he rushed over. Poplar Fruit didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he hugged Song Jiwen, who was a little out of control under the influence of alcohol. Luo Feiyue led the group of students behind him and said, it's okay. Thank you for your concern." Luo Feiyue looked around curiously and asked, "Poplar Fruit, what's going on?" Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "I talked some sense into them and they apologized. Everything's fine now." Luo Feiyue knew he was drunk, but he didn't believe Poplar Fruit's excuse. A group of martial artists bowed and apologized just because they were reasonable. If that was the case, the world would have been at peace long ago. Poplar Fruit went to find Liu Guilin and his family and said with a smile, "It's okay, it's all settled." He squatted down, hugged Little Dong, touched his face, and said, "Little Dong, does it hurt?" There were still traces of tears on Lil Dong's face, but he looked at Poplar Fruit with admiration. He shook his head and said, "Uncle Poplar Fruit, it doesn't hurt. Little Dong is really good." Poplar Fruit kissed him and praised him. "Poplar Fruit, it's all thanks to you today," Fang Wenjing said gratefully. "Sigh. We're friends, so there's no need to be so polite. Since I've encountered this matter, I'll definitely take care of it," Poplar Fruit said with a smile. He comforted them, and then said, "You guys go back first. Don't worry, if they dare to come up again, just call me." After sending off Liu Guilin and his family, Poplar Fruit helped Song Jiwen zip up his coat and said with a smile, "I'm really sorry for disturbing everyone's conversation. It's okay, we're regretting that we came late and didn't see you show off your power, haha." Fan Fang laughed. "There's no power, I'm just trying to reason with them," Poplar Fruit said with a smile. He saw Duan Xueqing in the crowd looking at him worriedly. He smiled, walked up, took Kiki, and said softly, "I've made you worry." Duan Xueqing shook her head, looked at Poplar Fruit with her beautiful eyes, and said in a low voice, "It's good that you're fine." Her conversation with Poplar Fruit was so soft that only the two of them could hear it clearly. Fan Fang said with a teasing smile, "What are you guys whispering about? Let's go back," Poplar Fruit said with a smile. He didn't answer directly, and said, "It's too cold outside." At this time, Liang Zhenglin slowly walked up. He looked at Yang Guo, who was in perfect condition, and his heart was uneasy. Why is he not injured at all? Didn't Brother Dafei come to beat him up? He pulled a girl who was close to him and asked in a low voice. The girl didn't know the situation, so she told him what Poplar Fruit said. Liang Zhenglin was even more confused. Did Brother Dafei retreat just because he talked reason? It can't be, right? Brother Dafei, you took 3,000 yuan from me. You just said a few words and left. Following his classmates to the restaurant, Liang Zhenglin was unhappy. He wanted to find a chance to call and ask what happened. At this time, there was a sudden roar of a motorcycle. Poplar Fruit turned around and saw a few gangsters with dyed red hair holding baseball bats coming down from the motorcycle. Seeing these people, Poplar Fruit felt that something was wrong. The one in the lead had a gold chain around his neck and gold rings on his hands. He was holding a mobile phone and looking at people. "Brother Dafei, it's him." A sharp-eyed gangster pointed at Poplar Fruit and said. Sure enough, they were looking for him. Poplar Fruit's eyes became sharp again. He shouldn't have been merciful just now. He should have punched them a few more times. They just left and now they're looking for him? Fu Lei, who had walked far away, sneezed. He didn't know that he had become Liang Zhenglin's scapegoat. At this moment, Liang Zhenglin had already quietly hidden. He was in a good mood. Brother Dafei had just arrived, and it looked so ostentatious. "Quick, go up and beat Poplar Fruit until he can't take care of himself. Who told you to be more handsome than me? Who told you to hook up with the woman I like? Kid, come out. I promise I won't beat you to death," Brother Dafei said arrogantly with a toothpick in his mouth. Knowing that this battle was inevitable, Poplar Fruit stuffed Kiki into Duan Xueqing's arms. Duan Xueqing couldn't hold him back. Poplar Fruit came out from the crowd and said calmly, "What? Do you have something to say?" Under his emotionless tone, there was indeed anger boiling. There were 6 people in front of him with baseball bats as weapons. It seemed that there would be a lot of physical pain today. Poplar Fruit wasn't confident to the point of 1 against 6, but the people behind him were either drunk or girls. Poplar Fruit had to stand up. "What do you have to say? Someone paid for you to stay in the hospital for 2 days. If you come out and let us beat you, you can suffer less." Brother Dafei smiled proudly. He liked to convince people with reason. Squeak. There was another series of breaking sounds, which attracted people's attention. This time, there were a few police cars. The police that Duan Xueqing had called for finally came. However, it was better for Shanshan to come late than never. Moreover, they just happened to run into the second group of people. It was really better to come at the right time than to come early. This sentence also applied to Brother Dafei. He couldn't understand why he had just arrived, and the police had also arrived. Brother Dafei dropped his toothpick and was surrounded by a group of policemen. He couldn't run away, so he had to put down the baseball bat and surrender. Liang Zhenglin looked at the turn of events in front of him, stunned. His heart was bleeding. How could it end like this? He didn't dare to show his face, so he secretly hid in the toilet. He was worried that Brother Dafei would see him and give him away. In Yangcheng, Song Jiwen knew people from the Public Security Bureau, and Law Enforcement Bureau. It was hard to say if it was a big matter, but for a small matter like catching a hoodlum, he made a phone call and let the leading policeman listen to the phone call. The rest of the matter could be arranged properly. Poplar Fruit let out a sigh of relief. Today's matter had come to an end. However, Guo family Shingi Dojo, Humph, this matter was not over yet. Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. Chapter 162. Poplar Fruit originally planned to find time the next day to talk to the Guo family Shingi martial arts school, but a series of events disrupted his plans. In the morning, Poplar Fruit carried Kiki, who had just woken up with a grumpy face, and coaxed her not to move and to let her father wash her face. Then, the doorbell rang. The first one to react was Goldie. Thanks to Poplar Fruit's frequent calcium supplements, it could now walk unsteadily. Goldie was seen running all the way, with a plastic rope wrapped around its leg. With a series of whooshing sounds, it ran to the door and whined at the door. Poplar Fruit stood up and carried Kiki to the door. He motioned for Goldie to move aside, then opened the door. It was actually his sister, Yang Ping, and brother-in-law, Yang Chongguan. "Hey, sister, why are you guys here?" Poplar Fruit was surprised and let them in. After doing business for a few months, Yang Ping and Yang Chongguan's complexions were different. In the past, one of them was in a small company with little business, while the other was in a government guest house in the sunset. Going to work every day was like retirement. There was nothing to look forward to in life, and they felt that they had aged a lot. But now, opening a specialty store required a lot of effort, running up and down. Moreover, it was located in the county's transportation hub. The people and things that they saw every day were different, and the vitality of their bodies was suddenly mobilized. Especially Yang Chongguan. He had changed his unconfident image of shrinking his shoulders and rubbing his hands when he spoke and did things. Now, his hair was combed, and he was wearing a suit and leather shoes. His leather shoes were shiny, and he looked 10 years younger. Yang Ping also began to pay attention to her dressing. Of course, she didn't put on heavy makeup, but she paid more attention to her clothes. At least, she didn't look like a country bumpkin anymore. "Today, we are coming to the provincial capital to discuss business with a courier company," Yang Chongguan smiled and said. He and Yang Ping sat on the sofa together. Yang Ping continued, "It's still early. We thought that since we haven't been here before, we asked Mom for the address and came to see you." She reached out to take Kiki's hug, but Kiki was still grumpy from being woken up. Other than her father, she didn't want anyone else. Seeing Yang Ping's hand, she turned her head and leaned on her father's neck. "She just woke up," Poplar Fruit smiled and said. When Yang Chongguan and Yang Ping came in, it had been observing the two strangers. It then wagged its tail and sniffed around. Yang Guo stretched out her leg and hooked Goldie's body, calling out, "Goldie, go play somewhere else." Goldie whooshing, and ran, it was its territory. So it turned its legs, and turned, its legs and turn. As a result, Goldie began to turn its head towards its hind leg. How could it touch it? It was just circling around in the same place. However, one time, it swung its hind legs casually, and the end of the plastic rope was thrown in front of its face. Goldie happily pounced on the rope, and it did catch the rope. However, when the rope pulled on its hind legs, it lost its balance and fell to the ground. Goldie shook its head. It was a little dizzy from the fall. After it stood up again, it began to chase after the plastic rope, and it didn't get tired of it. Poplar Fruit smiled and didn't care about it. He chatted with Yang Ping and Yang Ping. "How are you doing now? Is the store open?" Ever since he came back home, Poplar Fruit never asked about his sister's and brother-in-law's business. Although he had 50% of the shares, Poplar Fruit was like a shopkeeper who didn't do anything. Once he invested, he didn't care. There was actually a reason for this. Firstly, this was Yang Ping and Yang Chongguan's business. Poplar Fruit didn't want to interfere. Secondly, Poplar Fruit also had his own things to do. Poplar Fruit was really not interested in following up on matters like opening a store. Thirdly, and of course, the main reason was that Poplar Fruit was lazy. There were so many miscellaneous matters, Just thinking about it gave him a headache. Yongping didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She had planned to report to Poplar Fruit, but in the end, Poplar Fruit always just said, "It's okay, you guys handle it." Hearing Poplar Fruit's question, Yongping looked at him with a grumbling look. "It opened a long time ago." "It's been open for a month." Under Yongping's introduction, Poplar Fruit found out that in the past 2 months, Yongping and Yang Chongguan had already managed the store to be so popular. Poplar Fruit didn't pay attention to relationships, but Yang Chongguan firmly grasped the line of the county magistrate. Poplar Fruit was in the provincial capital, but his family had a lot of contact with the county magistrate. Their relationship was much closer than before. With the county magistrate's support, Yang Chongguan not only successfully completed the registration and other procedures, but also opened the store half a month earlier than previously planned. Under the county magistrate's secret instructions, the government's procurement also slightly tilted towards their store. The gifts that the government gave to investors were all provided by the store. This gave them a lot of sales. But the biggest part was the physical sales. The bus station was a good location, so they were destined to have many customers coming to buy every day. The products that Yang Chongguan and Yang Chongguan chose were very exquisite and beautiful. Plus, the prices weren't too expensive, so the tourists were willing to pay for some. "How's your online store?" Poplar Fruit asked. Yang Chongguan said happily, "The online store is already in preparation. We're looking for someone to design the store." Of course, what I said is all theoretical. As for how you do it, it's still up to you to figure it out. You can just say that you want to be a hands-off shopkeeper again. Yongping rolled her eyes and said disdainfully. Poplar Fruit was chatting with Yongping and Yang Chongguan when the door was suddenly opened. He turned around and saw Song Jiwen. He probably just woke up. His hair was messy, and his eyes were still blurry. He rubbed his eyes, ignored the people sitting in the living room, and went straight to the kitchen. With a clang, he opened Poplar Fruit's fridge and took out a carton of milk. He bit the plastic of the straw with his teeth and closed the fridge door. Under everyone's gaze, he took a piece of bread from the dining table and threw it into his mouth. Goldie couldn't stand it anymore. It whined and ran in front of Song Jiwen, not letting him go forward. Song Jiwen squatted down and sucked on the milk. He patted Goldie's head and said, "Goldie, it's not that I don't want to share with you, but if your father knows that I gave you these things, he'll beat me up." Raising his head, Song Jiwen saw 3 pairs of eyes and a pair of small eyes. "Ooh, Sister Ping, why are you here?" Song Jiwen scratched his head and greeted her. "I'm here to do something." "Why are you here?" Yang Ping asked curiously. "Haha, I live opposite," Song Jiwen laughed. He sucked on the milk, crossed the dam, and sat beside Poplar Fruit. "Brother-in-law, good morning." Song Jiwen also greeted Yang Chongguan. "Good morning, your ass." Poplar Fruit patted his head and scolded him with a smile, "Stealing my food and yet you're so righteous." "TSK, didn't you buy too much?" Song Jiwen said. "I'm not eating." "Kiki isn't eating. Throw away the rest." Poplar Fruit scolded him with a smile. "I bought too much because you come here all day to eat and drink." Yang Ping and Yang Chongguan sat for a while, then they got up and said goodbye. It was almost time. They had to find a courier company to talk about business. On the way, Yang Chongguan said to Yang Ping with a strange expression, "Our brother-in-law really doesn't have a girlfriend, right?" Yang Ping nodded and said, "Yeah, I can see that." "No, that's not what I meant." Yang Chongguan said, "Poplar Fruit is good-looking, rich, and capable. Why does he always hang out with Song Jiwen? They're so close. Could it be that his—" He didn't continue, because Yang Ping picked up her small bag and smashed it on him. Yang Ping chased after him and scolded him with a smile. "Could it be your ass? Who told you to think nonsense? You're the Brokeback Mountain. Your whole family is the Brokeback Mountain. I'm not familiar with doing business. There are a lot of things to criticize. Don't take it seriously. I'm begging for monthly votes. I'm begging for recommendations. Everyone, use your votes to hit the poor. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.